So, this is something a little different. Actually, no, it's not, because this is the third time I've talked about this movie. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Cherry Falls holds the prestigious honor of being the first horror movie I ever watched, while channel surfing at my friend's house when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And it traumatized me. I didn't even finish it. It probably only got about 20 or so minutes in, but I didn't sleep for weeks. I started using a nightlight. I put wind chimes on my door so I could hear if a killer came in the middle of the night. It was a whole thing. Obviously now I am a big horror fan, but that's also an extremely recent development. The pure trauma of watching this film made it so I was terrified of watching anything too intense. You know, like, I would sometimes watch horror. I watched Harper's Island. I adored Poltergeist, a Little Shop of Horror in high school. Sometimes I'd try a slasher movie or two, but I'd turn it off if I got too scared. And I ended up reading a lot of summaries of weird horror movies on Wikipedia instead of actually trying to watch them myself. I think the gateway into the genre was actually video games, particularly Until Dawn and the 2 most recent Resident Evil games. And then 2022 happened and I just started going to the movies again for the first time in 2 years. And God, 2022 was such a good year for horror. Seeing Nope and Barbarian and The Menu on the big screen just made me absolutely fall in love with the genre, and now I can somehow watch the most heinous shit imaginable and not be bothered. The process of getting over my fear of Cherry Falls specifically, though, was a bit more convoluted. On a trip to Greece in 2015, I finally worked up the courage to watch the trailer for Cherry Falls. Yes, just the trailer. This is mostly because I developed a little crush on Brittany Murphy, and I was scrolling through her Wikipedia page and realized, oh my god, she was the main character in Cherry Falls, like what the hell? I also noticed that Cherry Falls was listed as a slasher comedy, and that was when the first wave of embarrassment started to wash over me. And watching the trailer did confirm this. It seemed pretty jokey.
This is my post. I can't just split.
Cherry Falls.
And yet, I did not watch the movie itself for 4 more years. What finally did it was, Your Movie Sucks made his childhood trauma series where he talked about movies and TV shows that terrified him as a child, and a bunch of other people were doing it too. And I had literally just started making videos, so I was like, hey, that seems fun. I want to make one of those. Obviously being aware that I would have to watch Cherry Falls again because, like, that was my childhood trauma. And sure, I tried to talk myself out of it, like, oh, the trailer didn't look good, I don't want to spend money on it. But then I googled the movie and it turned out it was just like illegally uploaded to YouTube, so I didn't have an excuse anymore. I actually watched it at my job at the time. I was allowed to watch stuff as long as my work got done, and it gave me another task to focus on in case I got too scared. And I was extremely stressed during the first scene. This is the one that I most clearly remembered. It was my first time ever seeing a kill scene, but despite my overwhelming phobia, it did strike me just how not graphic it was. Like at all. My dumb child brain had filled in a lot of gaps. And then I got past the half-hour mark, and all my baggage suddenly disappeared, and I started to enjoy myself. It was a weird feeling, realizing I spent so many years terrified over what was essentially a dumb, chopped-up B-movie, and something about this made me feel hollow. It was the embarrassment, I'm telling you. This is some serious cringe shit right here. Whatever, I made the childhood trauma video, and I'm going to start off by being kind and by giving my past self a compliment. It's cool that I remade the Pop Your Cherry poster from the movie. Like, I remember working really hard on that, and it looks pretty accurate. But otherwise, this video is fucking awful. Like I said, I didn't pay to watch Cherry Falls, so I used the illegal YouTube download that I had to stretch because it looked like this. I got all my information secondhand from Bloody Disgusting, which, like, I guess I do trust them as a source, but I could have just gotten the Blu-ray. Everything they talked about was on the Blu-ray. And, worst of all, I called out multiple sites for incorrectly labeling the movie as an hour and a half.
I wonder if that's why the movie's barely over an hour, even though every place with information on it listed as being over an hour and a half. It's not.
Using the illegal YouTube version as my source, which, as it turned out, was sped up slightly. So yeah, fuck 2019 Grace. 2019 Grace was an idiot. But more than that, though, I felt like I didn't give Cherry Falls the credit it deserved. Once I let the movie sink in, the actual movie, not the made-up version terrorizing me in my head for almost 15 years, I started to realize, oh, this movie is actually super, super interesting, and it deserves more than the quick little blurb I gave it at the end of a super shitty video. So I got to work making a proper video on it. And this actually was a big moment in learning how to make YouTube videos. I learned how to rip Blu-rays, finally. Although I couldn't figure out how to convert them to MP4s, so I actually screen recorded everything I ripped so I could put them into Premiere. This was also my first time battling with copyright claims, so it's really stupid that I'm doing this again so soon after the Terrifier video. I guess this will just be good practice for whenever I make the Terrifier 3 video. I also think for as early as this video is, my analysis was pretty solid. And while I'm going to expand on it in this video, I don't think there's anything wrong with the conclusions I originally came to. The reason, then, the video's getting remade at all is because, well, I didn't watch horror movies back then. I spent a long time talking about tropes and other slasher movies, and I just did not know what I was talking about. And I think that shows. I find it really embarrassing. Like, at one point I'm talking about the kind of horror I like, and I show clips from Five Nights at Freddy's and Paranorman. Nothing wrong with those properties, it's just, yeah, I was not qualified to be talking about the stuff I talked about in that video. I do honestly feel like an imposter whenever I upload one of my long-ass videos about horror movies, because I didn't become a horror fan until the 2020s. And granted, I have been honest about that, and I have watched hundreds of horror movies at this point, but regardless, most people who make horror content have been horror fans their entire lives. Maybe I would have been earlier if Cherry Falls didn't freak me out so bad, but that's the past and I can't go back and change it. I'm not trying to pretend I'm something I'm not. I just make videos on what I'm interested in at the time, and right now I'm super into horror. And I look back at the Cherry Falls video and I see all sorts of stuff that I missed, or stuff that I got wrong, or stuff that I would love to go into more detail on. It's funny that in the last video, I said part of the reason I was making it was because I wanted to leave Cherry Falls in the past. I never wanted to think about it again.
I'm going to throw out every thought I have on this godforsaken movie, and hopefully I will finally be able to move on with my life.
But truthfully, I still think about it. A lot. The opening scene will just pop into my head every now and then, and it still kind of makes me anxious. Or I watch another horror movie and think, oh, this scene reminds me of Cherry Falls. There's no getting rid of it. Cherry Falls is part of me, and I am part of it. When I die, I will go into the movie and become a background extra. It's in my blood, it's in my DNA, and I'm also pretty much the only person who feels this way about it. It doesn't get a whole lot of discussion, so if I'm going to have a video on my channel talking about it, I want it to be good. Or at least as good as I'm, capable of making videos. It's been 25 years since this movie came out, and about 20 years since I watched it for the first time. I think it's keen for reevaluation now that I'm older and slightly less stupid about the subject. I'm also going to be unlisting the original video. It's gonna be linked in the description. I'm not hiding it. I just don't want it to show up in search results anymore, for reasons I'm going to be getting into later. But yeah, if you want to watch it, go check it out. But otherwise, I'm gonna get started. Here's the spoiler list. It's very long this time around. Sorry about that. And also a warning list. Special warning for sexual assault. There's going to be a lot of discussion about that. Like, I'm not exaggerating. It's gonna get kind of rough. So just, please proceed with caution if that bothers you. And alright, let's get into the movie. So, Cherry Falls was originally written in 1998 by Ken Selden, who had apparently always wanted to write a teen orgy.
I'd always wanted to write a teen orgy, and I realized that Hollywood probably wouldn't make a film that just had a teen orgy in it. But if you put a serial killer into the middle of the teen orgy, then they'd make it.
The first 2 drafts were written in about 3 months, and then Selden handed it off to producer Marcel Persinger to look for a distributor. Within 2 weeks, the script was picked up by October Films, who intended the film to be their flagship project for Rogue Pictures, which was their genre division. Selden and Persinger originally hoped that Selden might be able to direct it, but the studio apparently wanted Cherry Falls to be a larger budget art house movie.
But when October Films and Bingham Ray, who was such an advocate for film, and he wanted to make a prestigious art house drama, basically.
And so started shopping it around to prominent art house directors. The first director they approached was actually David Lynch. And it is an absolute shame he passed on it. Like, could you even imagine? But ultimately they went with Australian director Jeffrey Wright, who was best known for the cult classic Romper Stomper. Now, despite the fact that Cherry Falls was written to be extremely comedic, like there's a scene of a dog humping the killer's leg in the first draft of the script, the tone Wright leaned into while directing this movie was meant to be something more akin to Vertigo.
I distinctly remember him feeling that he wanted the tone of this to be like Vertigo. He wanted to shoot it like Vertigo and just make a really beautiful art house horror film.
Brittany Murphy was cast as the main character, Jody. She was 23 years old at the time, and this was right around when she was starting to break out and become a huge star. She would unfortunately pass away in 2009 at the age of 32. I spent way too long talking about Brittany Murphy in my first 2 videos. Like, oh boy, could you tell I had recently been forced out of the closet and I wasn't dealing with it well? I'm not going to do that this time, but I still do want to stress what an absolute tragedy it is that she died so young. In an interview that was done at the time of filming, Murphy seems genuinely very excited about the film, talking about how many layers there are to the story and how different it is from other movies in the horror genre.
It's by far the funniest one that I read. It's so different from any of the other movies, in my opinion, of its genre that have floated in front of my face in the past couple of years. And I thought, this is cool. This one I actually want to be a part of.
Other than Murphy, the most well-known actor in the film is Michael Biehn, who plays her father. Biehn has starred in a lot of well-known and beloved properties, like Aliens, The Abyss. He played Kyle Reese in The Terminator, and Jay Moore, of SNL fame, was cast as Jody's teacher, Mr. Marlston. Moore and Wright apparently butted heads on set a lot.
But we're still going to do it. We're still going to have a great time doing it. And we're going to try to make it look as original as possible. So they went and hired a lunatic from Australia.
They only had 30 days to shoot the movie, and Wright required a lot of flexibility from his cast and crew, and this led to a lot of tension on set. One notable incident was a fight Wright got into with cinematographer Anthony Richmond over there being too much blood in a scene, which escalated to the point that Richmond walked off set for nearly 2 days.
Tony suddenly disappeared from set, and about 10 minutes later, one of his sons, 2 of which worked in the camera department, told me that he'd walked off in protest. and my insistence on the shot.
To Wright's credit, he takes responsibility for most of the tension and expresses remorse for some of his actions. For example, during the scene where Marge reveals the town's backstory to Jody, Wright antagonized Marge's actress Candy Clark to get the performance he wanted out of her, and when they were done shooting, she walked over and slapped him. And Wright says in the commentary she was perfectly in the right to do that.
It was quite a serious slap, but it was fair enough. I'd given her some hell for the previous 45 minutes in order to get here, and she let it go on me, and she was perfectly entitled to do so.
The movie was constantly running behind schedule and over budget, which unfortunately led to a number of scenes Selden had written not being filmed, although Wright did add one that wasn't originally in the script. More on that later, but the biggest and most substantive change Wright made to the movie was to the orgy scene. Now, when Ken Selden originally wrote the orgy scene, he envisioned all the kids would be under white sheets, and as the killer runs through, red blood would be splashed onto the sheets.
I originally wrote the script. It described the final orgy as a sea of white sheets that were going up and down with red splotches appearing on them.
This is a fascinating idea for a visual that coincides well with the themes the movie is exploring, but also functions as a classy and artistic way to portray both sexual content and bloody murders without actually showing anything at all. However, instead of that, Wright filmed the scene so it would be full nudity.
Jeffrey decided to get rid of the sheets and shoot everybody nude.
Wright obviously has no problem filming graphic sex scenes, at least going off of Romper Stomper, but unfortunately, the Motion Picture Association of America did have a problem. I guess they're not actually called that anymore. I don't know, whatever. The MPAA kept slapping it with an NC-17 rating, and since Jeffrey Wright was obligated to deliver an R rating, they had to trim out a lot of the film. So the orgy, which is the entire reason this film exists in the first place, got cut to ribbons. There's hardly any nudity left at all.
So almost all of the stuff he shot of the orgy couldn't be used because it was X-rated.
The sexual assault scene apparently got trimmed down quite a bit too, and this isn't even getting into the violence, because that also posed a problem. The entire opening scene is absolutely butchered. I'm gonna go into more detail about this later, but it's so funny that this is the part that scared me so bad as a child, because having now read the scripts, there's hardly any of it left in the final film. One character who is killed about 20 minutes into the movie is killed off screen, which did seem to be the intent based on the script, but her dead body is literally only shown on screen for like a split-second flash. There's also this really weird moment where the cops find the two kids who were killed in the opening, and they're talking about Rod's body, but they never show it to us. And we never see the characters' faces when they're talking about Rod. It's either a shot of the cops from behind, or they cut to the person who isn't talking.
Over here, I found the boy face down in the water. About 1 million stab wounds in him.
This screams to me that it was dubbed over in post, and if you zoom in on the far shot of Stacy's corpse, there is something by her feet. I don't necessarily have any hard evidence that this is Rod, but in both versions of the script, Rod is laid out in front of Stacy's body. So yeah, it's very likely that's him. So why were they allowed to show Stacy's body, and Timmy's body, and the principal's body, but they weren't allowed to show Rod's? They were only allowed to show Annette's for like less than a second. It's completely nonsensical. The deputy's death was butchered too. It's the only CG death in the film and was meant to show his head be split all the way down. Nope, that got cut out. Marston was supposed to get skewered on screen. Got cut out. And to make matters worse for this already troubled film, a real-life national tragedy struck while it was already deep into production. The Columbine Massacre occurred in 1999 in Littleton, Colorado, and it resulted in 13 people, 12 of them children, being killed at Columbine High School. Now, Columbine wasn't the first tragedy of its kind, but it was arguably the first one to get the kind of media attention it did. And after Columbine, people were scrambling for someone to blame. And violent media was a pretty easy scapegoat. News outlets were literally running stories claiming that the two gunmen loved Marilyn Manson and they were wearing his shirts at the time of the massacre. And fuck Marilyn Manson, but both of those things were just blatant lies. Even stupider than that is that The Matrix got blamed because the characters wear trench coats, which is what the shooters were wearing during the massacre, and there was a Marilyn Manson song in it. That's it.
And there were the outfits, the dark coat and boots associated with Hollywood's more violent scenes.
Now, October Films, who owned the rights to Cherry Falls, was owned by Universal. And in 1999, Universal sold the studio to a man named Barry Diller, who used it to create a brand new studio called USA Films, along with his television network, USA Network. So Cherry Falls was slated to be USA Films' first release. But unfortunately, the Senate was going fucking crazy, freaking out over violent media. And USA Films did not want their first release to be a film that went against the Senate, especially since the content of Cherry Falls was already causing so many problems with the MPAA. At the end of it all, despite all the cuts made to get it to an R rating, and it being surprisingly successful overseas, USA Films decided to cut their losses in America. Writer Ken Selden says that the movie was pulled just a week or two before it was supposed to premiere in theaters.
And they pulled it, it was like a week or two before the release.
But Wikipedia links an article by the Chicago Tribune that talks about the movie being pulled out of theaters, which was written a month before the slated release date. Regardless, it was pulled very soon before, with USA Films instead choosing to air the film on their television station, USA Network, which is how I came to watch it a few years later.
I wanted to be the anti-Scream Queen.
Yeah, I think.
And it worked because it never came out. So.
Due to the fact that Cherry Falls was meant to be a theatrically released movie, and they got a director with some experience, it had a pretty decent budget. It was made for $14 million, which is roughly about the same budget Scream had, and had a higher budget than movies like The Strangers, Get Out. Honestly, pretty much every Blumhouse movie has a lower budget than Cherry Falls, meaning that Cherry Falls, due to all of this bullshit, has the prestigious honor of being the most expensive television movie ever made.
And so it became the most expensive television movie ever made. $14 million television movie.
Now, there were physical releases of this film. Most notably, there was a point in time where apparently the only way to get a physical copy of Cherry Falls was if you got it as a double feature with Terror Tract. But in 2016, Shout Factory released a Blu-ray of the film with a lot of really cool bonus features, including the shooting script, which is really helpful for my purposes. And that's still really the only way to watch it, unless you happen to catch it on TV. Or I guess that one other way. It does occasionally land on streaming. As of the time of me writing this, it's streaming on AMC+, but otherwise, it's very rare that this thing ever shows up on streaming, and I half expect it to be off by the time this video actually comes out. Worse still, the Shout Factory Blu-ray is still the original chopped up version. They couldn't find the missing footage. It's lost media now. Jeffrey Wright maintains that the missing footage isn't gone forever. It's probably just tucked away somewhere.
But I believe that studios and production companies never really lose anything. It's misplaced. But it is out there. So, I don't know, maybe in another 15 years we can show you the hardcore version.
I'd honestly buy a director's cut if they ever found the footage, but I don't have a lot of hope of it ever happening, and that's really, really unfortunate. I hate when government bullshit and stupid business decisions damage and destroy art. But that's just the world we live in, I guess. And hey, maybe in another 5 years, the footage will be found, and I get to make this video for a 4th time. But until that happens, this is it. This is the movie. Although I will be using the scripts to piece together what I can, this is the final product, and in some ways, it feels unfinished. There still is a lot of interesting shit in this movie though, and I feel like it deserves to get discussed. First though, a quick plot summary so we're all on the same page. Cherry Falls opens up with some idyllic shots of the town and the falls it was named after before cutting to a young couple named Rod and Stacy making out in a car. Rod wants to go a little further, but Stacy doesn't feel comfortable with it. And then a person with red fingernails and long black hair fucking murders them. Meanwhile, Jody and her boyfriend Kenny are also making out in a car, and Jody also says she doesn't want to go any further. This leads Kenny to dumping her.
I think we should start seeing other people.
What?
Jody goes home, gets yelled at by her dad, Brent, who is also the sheriff, and then a few hours later, he's called out to investigate the murders. They find that Stacy had been tortured and had the word virgin carved into her belly. Brent goes to the school, and Jody's teacher, Mr. Marlston, urges him to share details of the case. But Brent refuses.
Well, is there any other information you can give us?
I'm not at liberty to discuss the case any further.
That night, another student, named Annette, gets murdered. She also has the word virgin carved into her. Brent, feeling guilty for not disclosing more information, holds a meeting to tell the parents about the killer targeting virgins. The parents don't take it super well. Jody and her friend Timmy stay to watch. Timmy is killed and Jody is attacked. The killer starts to carve the word virgin into her thigh, but she manages to fight them off and escape. Afterwards, she describes the killer to the police, and Brent goes to call the principal, Mr. Sizzler. Jody eavesdrops on them and overhears her father say that the killer looks exactly like someone named Loralee Sherman. Jody's best friend, Sandy, tells her that all the local teens are planning an orgy so that they will lose their virginities and not get killed.
So everyone's decided to take themselves off the endangered species list and have sex.
Jody sneaks out to the library, finds some old articles about Loralee Sherman, and then confronts her mom. Her mom tells her that 27 years ago, a high school girl named Loralee Sherman accused 4 local boys of assaulting her. The boys were from good families, so no one believed her, and Loralee disappeared shortly after. One of the boys accused was the principal, and another was Brent. But her mom insists that Brent was too drunk to have done it.
Yes, honey, he didn't participate. He was sick. He was falling down drunk.
Jody goes to Kenny's house and aggressively tries to seduce him, but they end up fighting and she leaves. Meanwhile, Brent is driving all over the fucking place trying to find Loralee. He finds her child abuse dead, and then gets a call from Mr. Sizzler. Brent finds him super dead, and then gets knocked out. Meanwhile, the orgy is starting. Kenny is there with another girl, but decides to leave to look for Jody, who is biking over to Mr. Marlston's house. She helps him drag a trunk into his house, and then finds her father in the trunk. Surprise! Mr. Marlston was the killer the entire time. He is the son of Loralee Sherman, conceived the night she was assaulted, and he forces Brent to tell Jody the whole story. Brent confesses to assaulting Loralee. It's basically confirmed that he's Marlston's father, and then Marlston starts to carve into Jody's thigh again. Luckily, they're saved by Kenny showing up. He forces his way inside and frees Jody and Brent, but Brent ends up dying trying to fight off Marlston. Kenny and Jody run to the orgy, Marlston kills a cop, and then busts into the orgy and starts wildly stabbing people. Jody pushes Marlston off of a balcony. He survives despite, being impaled, but then the deputy shoots him to death. Sometime later, Jody lies and tells the authorities that she has no idea why Marlston committed the murders, and then just as she's about to drive off with her mother, she spots Loralee lingering across the street. The waterfalls at the edge of town then turn red. The end. Okay, so obviously this is kind of a weird movie. on a lot of different levels. I actually remember when I rewatched this back in 2019, I was so surprised by how goofy this movie was.
Once, in the 8th grade, I had a fight with Ron, and I told him to fuck off and die.
I didn't notice it was funny when I was a child, because I was too busy hiding in my friend's closet and crying. But as an adult, Marlston's severed hand being stuck on Mark's head at the end just like absolutely sent me. And this stupid gag. And shout out to the fact that this movie takes place in Virginia. Virginia. It's an obvious joke, but I'm glad they went for it. The real crazy shit is in the dialogue, though. Like, oh my god, some of the lines in this movie. Hymen Holocaust.
We're talking Hymen Holocaust here.
Goddamn fuckfest.
We're gonna have a goddamn fuckfest on our hands.
Among others.
Hurricane Hormone has hit the whole entire school.
Holy Hymen's Batman, they're killing virgin.
She thinks fellatio is a character in Shakespeare.
Like, this is a good example of a film where no one talks like a normal person, but it has so much personality oozing out from it that I really don't care. What is a little bit more questionable is the weird sexual chemistry everyone has with each other. Jody's mom and Kenny.
Your headlights are
very observant.
The secretary is giving the principal bedroom eyes the entire time she's on screen. Even Jody and her dad.
Take 5, champ.
Like, what the fuck is this? It wasn't surprising at all to find out that this initially started off as a comedy and then was later directed to be darker and more atmospheric, because there are definitely these really weird moments and even some straight up clashing tones. There's this one scene towards the middle where Jody is wandering around the school after hours looking for Timmy, and it's very beautifully shot and spooky and atmospheric. And then the killer shows up, and suddenly they're hissing the word virgin. Virgin. And Jody hits them with a shark. The most egregious total clash would be at the end, with Loralee's backstory being played completely straight, and then just a few minutes later we got half-naked teenagers falling down the stairs. The orgy scene is genuinely one of the craziest scenes I've seen in a slasher movie. It's just so chaotic and over the top, and everyone is fucking naked, or at least as naked as the MPAA would allow. And Jay Moore is absolutely selling it. He's believable enough as a meek, gentle English teacher, although in the classroom scene there are a couple of slips that he's got a darker edge. He seems slightly bothered by Cindy saying the killer should get the electric chair.
Legitimate reaction. Unfortunately, the means of execution this day happens to be lethal injection.
He encourages a student to say some absolutely heinous shit about Ron and Stacy's murders.
I would like to know whether this killer removed any body parts or sexually defiled any orifice of either victim.
Like, he literally just calls on Ben and tells him to say something disrespectful that he knows is going to upset the other students.
Ben, I know you have a very different point of view regarding this tragedy, so...
And then he enacts physical punishment when the students get out of hand. Something the principal even notices and seems bothered by. He also seems a bit too eager to meet Brent, and then is trying really, really hard to get Brent to share the details of the case with the students.
Well, Sheriff Plato says the polis can only remain healthy if truth is available to all citizens.
And once he drops the nice guy act, Jay Moore goes off the rails.
What's in the trunk?
Your dad.
He's clearly putting 110% of everything he does into every delivery, every facial expression. He's such a big reason why the last chunk of the movie is as fun as it is.
Class dismissed!
This, of course, does lead to the big elephant in the room, though, which is, okay, so the killer in Cherry Falls is a man who dresses like a woman in order to prey on children. innocent children in particular.
They're precious, virginal children.
That, unfortunately, slots nicely into a popular stereotype about trans women. And it sucks because I like the design of the killer. It's interesting as far as American slasher movies go. The hair covering the face up until the reveal is apparently at least partially inspired by Japanese horror movies.
We had to go to great lengths, of course, to keep the face covered, but if you watched any Japanese horror movies, you know very, very quickly how to do that.
And while I have no evidence for this being an inspiration, the killer kind of reminds me of Italian giallo movies, especially since there is an extreme level of brutality and sexuality to the killings in giallo movies, which is obviously present here. Actually, I remember when I first saw *Malignant*, which is heavily inspired by giallo. The whole look of the killer reminded me a lot of Cherry Falls, with the black outfit and the long dark hair. Not to mention that the long black hair with a white streak and the red fingernails are extremely memorable visuals. But it's just super awkward because this is a shitty, harmful horror trope that puts across the idea that trans women are predatory by nature. In fact, since my last video, J.K. Rowling, whose entire personality for the past 5 years has been hating trans women, wrote a book where the killer is a pervert who dresses like a woman to hurt other women. And much more prominent channels than mine called it out and discussed the trope at length. I don't necessarily think anyone involved in this movie is transphobic. I honestly think that they didn't really think about it at all. Because Marston isn't meant to be trans, he's just dressing like his mother in order to get revenge on her behalf. It's basically the same twist that Psycho had. But even Psycho, which was made 40 years earlier, jumped in at the very end to specify that Norman Bates isn't trans.
Why was he dressed like that? He's a transvestite. Not exactly.
Because they knew how it looked. And when I talked about this movie 5 years ago, the only piece of literature I could find that talked about it was called Transgender on Screen. So, you know, you do this kind of thing, people get a certain idea. I do give this movie some credit though, because like, you'd think with it being a horror comedy, there'd be a lot of mean-spirited jokes about the killer being a man dressed like a woman, but like, no, not really. Literally all there is this moment.
Why are you wearing lipstick? Because it makes me pretty.
And Marston casually putting on makeup while Brent and Jody are sobbing their eyes out in his torture dungeon.
Well, you know what happened. Yeah, well, I don't remember, so keep going.
Also, the fact that he takes the time to put the wig back on while his prisoners are escaping is so funny to me. Like, that is so fucking extra. I kind of admire his commitment. There's this weird sense of irony, though, because the original script, the one that was written to be more comedic, did not have Marston dressed like Loralee for the climax. No, instead the comedy was based entirely on a teacher showing up to a high school orgy, and a dog humping his leg. So the darker, more artistic version of the story actually went goofier in the climax than the comedic version. And in that way, it is a bit more cliche, because it just ends up falling into the old trope of, oh man, dressed like a woman, that's so weird and spooky. Cherry Falls is a weirdly cliche movie. Like, despite the satirical premise, it basically just plays certain tropes completely straight. Here's the library research scene you see in like every horror movie.
This is a common scene in horror films, isn't it? Where the heroine goes and looks up something in a library or on microfiche or what have you. We see it a lot. We couldn't avoid it.
Killer comes back for one more scare.
No!
Main character has a gay best friend. Literally, the note that this movie ends on is that thing where like the killer appears across the street and then like a bus drives by and they're caught. Even scenes where there are really interesting ideas for satire don't really go anywhere. Take the scene where Brent explains that virgins are being killed to the town's parents.
And all 3 victims, to the best of our knowledge, appeared to be virgins.
The parents are outraged, and they're clearly more concerned about preserving their children's virginities than the fact that they might be killed.
Well, what are we supposed to tell our kids?
To go out and get laid if they want to feel safe?
Which kind of reminds me of Claire's dad in Black Christmas. His daughter is missing, and when a cop tries to assure him that she's probably just out with a boy, the dad responds,
"Thanks. That's not much consolation."
Which of course implies that he's more concerned about his daughter's virtue than whether or not she's actually alive.
I didn't send my daughter here to be drinking and picking up boys.
However, Black Christmas has multiple scenes where the dad gawks at all the sexual shit in the sorority house and acts disapprovingly at the women trying to help him find his daughter, and there are other characters who treat women like objects who need a man to tell them what to do. It's a consistent theme. By contrast, there isn't really much more to the parents in Cherry Falls other than this scene. Maybe at one point there was going to be. The 1999 shooting script has a crossed out section where the news was meant to interview some of the parents about how outraged they are about the orgy, and then when the kids were running out of the school, a bunch of them were supposed to be immediately grabbed and dragged away by their parents. There was also meant to be a montage of the kids getting ready for the orgy, and Sandy sneaking out of the house while her mother chases after her. So, there did seem to be an intent to show more of her parents' reactions. But as it is, all we got after the gym scene is...
But we are getting some calls from some irate parents. What do you want us to do about this sex party the high school kids are throwing?
And also, this one scene with Brent. In the beginning of the movie, Brent is shown to be the overly protective sheriff dad that you see all the time in movies. But once he finds out about the virgin thing, he suddenly becomes concerned that his daughter isn't having sex.
Can you go further than you have?
Yes.
And that's great. I love that. I wish that there was more stuff like that. It just seems like a huge missed opportunity, especially since the virgin trope is the only trope the movie really explores in any depth. In fact, the entire movie is based around the subversion of this trope. So, in case you don't know, in slasher movies, the horny couple and or the promiscuous girls always die early, and the final girl, meaning the last girl left alive by the end, are almost always virgins. Now, this wasn't always the case. You could maybe kinda sorta make an argument that this was present in 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, since the couple in that movie got butchered, but it definitely wasn't in Black Christmas, which was released just a few months later. The virgin literally dies first in Black Christmas.
Hasn't she had enough trouble fitting in here without you getting at her all the time? Come on, I know a professional virgin when I see one.
And the final girl is a pregnant college student who wants to get an abortion. Now the movie is totally on her side for wanting the abortion.
Do you remember when we first met? You told me about you wanting to be a concert pianist. And I told you about some of the things that I wanted to do. I still want to do those things.
Black Christmas is an extremely sex-positive movie, especially in regards to women's sexualities. Arguably, the virgin final girl trope originated a few years later in 1978's Halloween. Annie and Linda are sneaking around, shirking their responsibilities to bang their boyfriends, and they're killed. Laurie is too nervous to go out with a boy that she likes, and she lives. Now, I don't personally think that there's any kind of gross morality going on here. Annie and Linda are both likable characters, and their deaths are treated as tragic. Like, at the end of the day, they were just getting into usual teenage mischief and absolutely did not deserve to die for it. And it's hard to say that Laurie was rewarded for her chastity when she ends the film with extreme trauma. And also the boy she likes explodes in the sequel. There was also 1979's Tourist Trap. The girl who's labeled the promiscuous one dies early.
That is Eileen's laugh. I'll bet you $10 I know who she's in there with.
Woody,
Woody or some lucky farm boy.
While the more wide-eyed, innocent girl lives. Although, again, she's traumatized for life. Where this whole thing really starts to pick up steam is in 1980 with Friday the 13th, which was a Halloween ripoff.
And Sean called me up and said, Halloween is making incredible money at the box office, let's rip it off.
Boy, I've been getting a lot of mileage out of that clip. And one of the things they seemingly stole is the killer killing off horny teenagers. This time around, though, it's actually part of the killer's motive. Pamela's son Jason drowned when the camp counselors were too busy having sex to watch him, and so she blames all camp counselors and starts slaughtering them to keep the camp closed, starting with the horny ones.
We weren't doing anything, we were just messing up.
And then Friday the 13th made a shitload of money, so they made more and more of them with the same formula, and then the Halloween sequels came out, and they also had a bunch of horny couples getting slaughtered. And then other movies were made to cash in on the slasher trend, and it became a whole thing. Now, I don't think the writers and directors and studio heads were rubbing their hands together, cackling about how they're killing off sexually liberated women, or anything like that. I think that part of the reason that things developed the way that they did is because characters going off to have sex is an easy way to get them away from the group so that they can be killed without the other characters immediately noticing. And also, sex sells. So these movies were taking advantage of this trope and started putting in tits at every opportunity. This got to the point that at least one of the Friday the 13th movies straight up hired their actresses based on what their breasts look like.
Everybody was cast because of the size of their tits. It was like a porn film in a lot of ways.
The next day I didn't have a part. And the excuse was that I wasn't well enough endowed.
One of the more interesting slashers in regards to this is Silent Night, Deadly Night. And not only because it has some of the most funniest gratuitous nudity I've ever seen. Like, dude, I'd rather put a shirt on to answer the door than pants. Like, what the fuck is this? But also, it almost has an awareness of the fact that slasher movies are essentially punishing teens for having sex. Like, the movie follows this boy named Billy, who is told that Santa punishes naughty kids.
All the naughty ones, he punishes.
And then shortly after, witnesses a man dressed as Santa assaulting and murdering his mother. He then grows up in a very religious orphanage where he sees Mother Superior brutally punish a couple for having sex. So he genuinely grows up believing that sex is evil and those who have it deserve to be punished with violence, which is what he does when he finally snaps and becomes a slasher villain.
Punished! Punished! Punished!
I do admit that might be an overanalysis on my part, but there definitely have been films that have straight up satirized the weird morality of sex in horror movies. The Cabin in the Woods from 2011 has the whole horror genre turned into a ritual, with the tropes turned into strict rules that have to be followed or the world will end. One of the rules is that the virgin has to either survive or be killed last. What's interesting though is that in this movie, the woman they choose to be the virgin isn't a virgin.
Me? Virgin? We work with what we have.
She had an affair with her professor before the events of the movie. We never see it happen, but it happened. The characters talk about it before leaving for the cabin.
What's not his fault? Fucking his student or breaking up with her by email? I knew what I was getting into.
And there is something very true about that. We as the audience usually only get to see the teens in slasher movies for one single night of their lives. And we just assume things about them based on what they are doing that one night. Just because a girl isn't currently having sex right now in front of us doesn't mean that she's never had sex. There's also Scream from 1996, which is an extremely meta, self-aware slasher that plays with the tropes that came before it. And the virgin trope is one of the big ones.
That's why she always outsmarted the killer in the big chase scene at the end. Only virgins can do that. Don't you know the rules?
Sydney starts the movie as a virgin who is extremely resistant to having sex with her boyfriend, but ends up giving in towards the end. And because of this, the killers, one of whom is her boyfriend, mocks her that she's now able to die.
Now you're no longer a virgin. I said virgin. Now you gotta die.
However, despite this, she ends up defeating them, becoming a final girl who's not a virgin. Scream was a big deal when it came out. The slasher genre at this point had been around for about 2 decades, with very little deviance from the formula, and was considered extremely stale. So this movie having a fun, genre-savvy sense of humor made it feel extremely fresh and new. And suddenly, there was a huge influx of self-aware slasher movies being made. Cherry Falls was one of them. In fact, the only times I ever see Cherry Falls get brought up in discussions is when people are talking about their favorite Scream ripoffs. And I would say it's perfectly fair to call Cherry Falls a Scream ripoff. There are definite similarities, even outside of the genre-savvy sense of humor. The movie opening with teen lovers being brutally killed, then cutting to the female lead having problems with her boyfriend trying to pressure her to sleep with him, her going to school the next day and finding out about the murders from her best friend as they're walking in. The teenagers deciding to throw a huge party, which ends up with the killer attacking a number of kids there and the principal being killed in his office. And hell, Annette's parents coming home and finding her body hung up on the ceiling is very reminiscent of Casey Becker's famous death in the opening of Scream. But what's funny is that while Scream does subvert the final girl being a virgin trope by having the final girl have sex, Cherry Falls doesn't. Jody doesn't join in on the human dog pile. She's still never had sex. The final girl is still a virgin. It's just that most of the kids who were murdered were virgins as well. Another movie I'd say Cherry Falls is similar to is Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. It's also based around subverting a common horror trope. In this case, that hillbillies are fucked up and evil. We see the movie from the perspective of 2 kindly hillbillies whose hard-earned property is continually being invaded by dumbass college kids who just assume that they're dangerous because of where they live.
They must have thought that you were trying to harm me.
Oh, and why would they think that?
I don't know.
The movie ends up being about stereotypes, lack of communication, and prejudiced beliefs, which are ultimately why tropes like this exist in the first place.
Well, it may not have been you, but it was definitely your kind.
My kind? No, hey, I can't even hurt a fish, can I, Tucker? I can't even hurt fish.
That's right.
I don't think I could rightly say that Cherry Falls really explores the idea of virginity in horror movies. I mean, ultimately, the reason the final girl being a virgin trope is so heavily scrutinized is because it gives the idea that certain people with certain virtues deserve to live more than others. You'd think that there'd be parents getting mad at their kids for not being killed, or people grieving because, oh no, why did sweet little Stacy get killed and not that skank Sharon? It's not fair. Something that actually explores why the trope is ripe for parody in the first place. The parents freaking out in the gym is close, especially this one line.
I can't lock my daughter up in the basement.
I wouldn't worry about it, Victor.
What are you saying about my daughter?
But that's more making fun of real-life attitudes about teenage sex, not so much the attitudes present in the movies being satirized. Tucker and Dale is actually saying something about the trope it's subverting. Cherry Falls is just kind of pointing at it and saying, hey, that exists. Wouldn't it be funny if we did the opposite? That being said, though, I do actually think it's fitting for Jody's character to end the way she does. Like, a lot of the time in movies, you see the rebellious girl who dresses in all black and she's sleeping around and she's a bad girl, whereas the virgin is more sweet and innocent and childlike. Jody is a mix of all that. She's a little rebellious, she breaks curfew and fights with her father and dresses in all black. But she's still a kid who loves her mom and sleeps with a stuffed animal and isn't ready to go all the way yet. Brittany Murphy was chosen for the role specifically to give Jody a certain vulnerability and strength, and she completely nails it. Jody doesn't really feel like a trope, she feels like her own person. And while the movie doesn't say anything particularly interesting about it, there's something nice about there being no morality aside to whether or not she's had sex at the end. She's a virgin and she lives. But most of the kids at the sex party live too, which is actually really interesting. Usually in slasher movies, when there's a lot of minor characters with loud personalities, they're just there to be killed, but not here. Most of them make it out alive, and most of them are hanging around for the climax too, which you also don't see a lot. Going back to Scream for a minute, most of the people leave the party after the principal is killed, leaving just our core cast for the finale. This is mostly due to the fact that Scream hasn't revealed its killer yet. It would be too chaotic if there were dozens and dozens of possible suspects hanging out while the killer is running around stabbing people. Meanwhile, in Cherry Falls, the whodunit portion of the story is over. We already know that the killer is Marlston by the time Jody arrives at the orgy, and she loudly announces it when she walks in the door.
It's Mr. Marlston! He's the killer!
The orgy scene isn't supposed to be a tense, intriguing mystery. It's meant to be as chaotic as humanly possible, so you need as many human bodies as you could possibly shove into an abandoned building. And since all these people have to be there anyways, it's nice that a good chunk of them get side stories and personalities, so we actually care when Marlston busts in and starts slashing at them. My favorite of the minor characters is definitely Cindy. She's the school slut, I guess you could say. She's got a reputation for sleeping around.
What's your concept of cool, Doc? Bang the entire senior class, starting with A?
In any other slasher movie, Cindy would most likely be written as a mean girl, and would probably be one of the first ones to die. And at first, she does seem to kind of be a bully. She's rude to Sandy in class.
I guess at times like this, I just hope there's a heaven.
Lame.
But it does immediately become clear that Cindy is just really angry about the murder of two of her classmates, and the rest of the class is on her side about that.
I'd like to offer the killer's ass some support in the fucking electric chair.
And then once the kids find out that the killer is targeting virgins, she becomes a sort of mentor figure to the other girls. She literally holds a Q&A where the girls all ask her questions and they look at her in awe and respect as she explains contraceptives and that boys are stupid and that they shouldn't expect to get an orgasm.
Unless we're talking about masturbation. Forget it.
And then she makes Ben agree to give her everything he owns if she sleeps with him at the orgy, despite him slut-shaming her earlier.
And your K2 snowboard.
I want my snowboard. All right, the board too.
The way teenage boys are portrayed in this movie is genuinely really funny. They're all pretty much written as dumb dorks. Not like in a mean way, really. Like, it kind of gives the impression of showing just how young and inexperienced these kids really are when it comes to sex. Sandy tells Cindy that she's going too hard on the boys. Cindy shoots her a "are you fucking kidding me" look, and then we immediately smash cut to the boys sitting in a car going, "So how many holes do girls have?"
Dennis asked me today if chicks had 2 holes or 3.
Did not.
At the beginning of the movie, Rod, for some reason, is trying to seduce Stacy by pretending to be an alien.
On my planet, the women are barren. I've traveled secretly across the depths of space, assuming human form, so that I may come to know earthly women. I wish for you to know my true name, Sunabulax.
Like, oh my god, he's such a fucking nerd. That's weirdly adorable, and Stacy seems to think so too. Similarly, Sandy has a huge crush on Mark, and the entire movie she's just like lovingly gazing at him while he plays with his food, acts like a stupid stoner in class, and just like severely overdoes it with the body spray.
What's that smell?
Nothing.
I like it.
This is actually a remnant from a cut scene where Mark spills aftershave all over himself before the orgy begins. But it's kind of funnier without it. You know, like, I remember that there was always at least a couple of boys in high school who just severely overdid it with the axe.
Just a little cologne.
I wouldn't go near any candles if I were you.
And it gives him the impression of being really insecure, despite how cocky he was acting earlier.
Next thing we have to do is find a psycho who's offing chicks who don't give head.
And then when Sandy finally approaches him at the orgy and they're dancing together, he tries to, be the tough guy and tells her not to be scared, and she just responds,
You're the one shaking.
What's cute, though, is that they end up liking each other so much that they just, forget to have sex. They just spend the orgy dancing and gazing into each other's eyes. And that works for them. They seem perfectly happy and content. The girls actually have a lot of control over their sexualities in this movie. Cindy's completely in control of Ben during the orgy, the boys are approaching the girls, and the girls are the ones setting the rules.
Okay, but you have to wear rubber.
The character of Sharon is treated kinda shitty, like she's trying to get with Jody's ex-boyfriend, and the other characters call her a slut for it.
And you cannot leave saving his life up to that slut, Sharon.
And unlike Cindy, she is kind of written to be a bully a little bit.
I wouldn't go near any candles if I were you.
But again, she isn't punished for it like in other slasher movies. She still makes it to the end alive. We also have a lot of girls fighting back against pushy guys who are trying to get them to have sex before they're ready. In the first scene, we have Stacy immediately shutting Rod down when he tries to feel her up.
Keep that up, Rod, and it will be your last act.
And when he pushes her after she says no, she scratches his face and gets out of the car. Annette finds out a boy is spreading rumors that she performed sex acts on him, and her response is to publicly beat the shit out of him.
Better than a cocksucking liar.
I'll kill you.
Jody doesn't give in when Kenny pressures her into having sex. It's later revealed that he's been pressuring her for an entire year.
Kenny, you've been pressuring me for a whole year to sleep with you.
And still, she stood her ground, even as he dumped her for not wanting to go all the way.
So is this goodbye or good night?
I think that's up to you.
Kenny even gets a taste of his own medicine later on when Jody, pissed off upon finding out her parents are liars, starts really aggressively trying to get Kenny to sleep with her, and it freaks Kenny out so much that they essentially break up again. That's another reason I'm glad Jody ends the movie as a virgin. It's important to her. She expresses to Sandy that she wants her first time to be special.
Didn't you want your first time to be something beautiful, something romantic?
And she isn't forced to give that up to save her own life. In fact, the original ending, which supposedly was never filmed, had Jody losing her virginity after she defeated Marlston, exactly in the way she wanted. She's allowed to go at her own pace. She isn't acting out of anger. She doesn't have her boyfriend or a killer forcing her to do something before she's ready. And there is something genuinely nice about that. However, one of the really fucked up side effects of the girls getting a lot of agency and their own sexualities is that they are ultimately the ones who choose if they are going to have sex or not. In this movie, where virgins are getting killed. In case you're wondering how exactly Marlston is figuring out who's a virgin and who isn't, the movie doesn't really explain, but it is heavily implied that he's basing it all off of gossip. You know, he tells Jody he heard rumors about her and Kenny.
I heard that you broke up with Kenny.
And we do see the kids gossiping about if Annette is a virgin or not after the fight.
She thinks Fellatio is a character in Shakespeare. She wouldn't know a dick if its name was Woody.
The fight that Annette starts in the cafeteria was actually meant as a way for Marlston to find out that she's a virgin. That was confirmed by Wright in the commentary.
It wasn't in the original script, but I asked Ken to put it in because we needed to see how the killer would discover who was a virgin and who wasn't. I mean, that's pretty personal information that he had access to, but if it could come about through a fight in the school canteen, then that would solve a lot of problems.
I don't know why he says that he added the scene, though. It was in the 1998 script. And it actually made more sense in the 1998 script. Marlston was the one who separated Annette from the guy who spread the rumor and then told her that they could talk about it later. which makes perfect sense. Marlston having a heart-to-heart with Annette would give him a better chance of getting the truth on if she's actually a virgin or not. In the movie, this line is given to the principal.
Lie to everyone about me!
Tell me about it in the office.
Maybe that's to frame the principal as more suspicious, but now makes it so that Marlston is instead talking to the dude that Annette was beating up. Maybe him talking to the guy who spread the rumor is supposed to imply that Marlston figured out if he was lying or not, and then used that to figure out if Annette was really a virgin. Which, alright, but then how the hell would he know that Annette's parents were going out that night? Also, I have absolutely no idea how he knows whether Timmy is a virgin or not. We never see him interact with Timmy. Is the implication that Timmy is automatically assumed to be a virgin because he's gay? Probably not, because Timmy apparently wasn't written to be gay.
But we asked him to play Timmy as a gay guy, so that Jody would have that's Brittany's character, would have a sort of a gay best guy friend. It wasn't originally written that way, but we workshopped that in pre-production.
We just have no idea what's going on with him, I guess. The 1998 script actually has a little explanation for Ron and Stacy's deaths, which actually might explain Timmy's too. Marlston is the cool teacher that all the kids like to talk to about their problems, and the cops specifically interview him to figure out if Ron and Stacy had told him if they were virgins. But the film ended up changing this, making it so instead the cops talk to the coroner, who investigates the female victim's hymen.
The hymen was intact. We found no evidence of semen on the clothes, skin, hair, mouth, or the anus.
This is genuinely the most uncomfortable scene in the film. I do not like all this standing around talking about underage girls' anatomy. Was this scene added to be more realistic? Because it's not. And even if it was, Marlston manipulating his students to learn personal info makes perfect sense and completely eradicates that plot hole. And it's kind of annoying that that all got erased. But in any case, we know from the coroner that Marlston is correct in his assessment, however it is he's going about it in the film. And in the opening scene, we do see him watching Ron and Stacy to see whether or not they have sex. This is a little bit reminiscent of the Zodiac Killer. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but those murders were committed, by and large, against young couples who drove out to an isolated location or lover's lane to have sex in their car, and then the killer would pull up behind them and attack them. Here, though, the subversion comes from the fact that the teenagers don't have sex, and this is what Marlston is waiting to see. As soon as Stacy gets out of the car and she and Rod loudly talk about how they both want their first time to be with each other, that's when Marlston puts on his headlights and drives up to them. They even put their voices over Marlston's car to get across that he heard them say it.
I want my first time to be with you.
And so do I.
This is what he was waiting for. This is the confirmation he needed that these two are virgins and he could go ahead with his plan. Which, unfortunately, means that if Stacy didn't say no to Rod, they wouldn't have died. And in the same vein, if Annette hadn't stood up for herself against the weird creep spreading rumors about her, she wouldn't have died. The worst example of a girl being punished for saying no in this movie actually comes from the first draft of the script, where Rod was trying to rape Stacy. The script literally uses the words date rape. Stacy has to scratch his face to get him to stop, and then runs into the woods to get away from him before Marlston attacks her. Now, a few parts of this did make it into the final version of the film. Ron and Stacy's conversation about dying a virgin is given to Jody and Kenny instead.
Does it ever bother you could die a virgin?
Yeah. It's right up there with global warming.
And Stacy still does scratch Rod's face and gets out of the car. But obviously, Rod isn't a rapist in the final version, or at least not a potential rapist. He's just pushy. And he does end up promising to respect Stacy's boundaries, and she forgives him. He even apologizes in the shooting script, although that didn't make it into the film for whatever reason. Now, I do understand why opening the movie with an attempted rape would make sense. Considering the twist later on that a bunch of the town's men are rapists, I could see how setting that up early would be a good idea. As it is, aside from a few moments where people speculate about the murders, rape isn't brought into the story until after the 50-minute mark. So it might feel more natural if it was introduced in the beginning. However, I do totally support them taking this out because this would essentially mean that Stacy would have been punished for running away from her rapist. If she had stayed in the car and let Rod do whatever he wanted, she wouldn't have been tortured and killed. It honestly almost makes it sound like getting raped is the better option, and that just feels a little bit too cruel. Something similar happens in the movie Slugs, where a teenage girl is hiding from a guy trying to rape her, and she's eaten alive for it. You know, like, it just left me with a bad taste in my mouth. The only time in this whole movie we ever see a guy turn down a girl is Kenny. He does it twice, actually. Once with Jody when she's upset about her parents, and a second time with Sharon at the orgy. And he isn't tortured or killed because of this. Jody is attacked and has her leg carved up because she said no to Kenny. Nothing happens to Kenny when he says no to Jody. He does get his chest slashed during the orgy when Marston's just snapped and is going after everyone, but then he lives. He's good. It's nice that this is a movie where the girls aren't punished for having sex, and that they are ultimately in control of all sexual situations that they're put in. But what we ended up with accidentally is that the girls are being punished for setting boundaries and saying no. And they are punished badly. I'm not saying that the guys get it easy. Rod is lying on the ground covered in stab wounds, crying out for his girlfriend for quite a while. And God knows what happened to the principal. But like, dude, the girls are getting crucified alive. This is directly stated in the movie that Stacy was alive and suffering through everything that happened to her.
A lot of blood pumped out of her wounds, which means
all this was done to her while she was still alive.
And if you look in the shooting script, the word mercifully was used for both Rod and Stacy while they're being attacked. For Rod, it was used to describe his quick death. For Stacy, it was used because she lost consciousness halfway through her torture. But then the killer wakes her up anyways, so she could feel the rest of it. Stacy's death is definitely the most censored portion of the film. The script says that Marston is supposed to slice off 3 of her fingers when he attacks her in the car, and in the final version, the editing gets really weird and choppy when he's swinging his knife at her. And I don't think it's because I have a bad disc or anything like that, because it looks like that in the illegal YouTube version too. I wonder if they were forced to edit around the fingers coming off. Although that is just a guess. She seems to have all of her fingers a few seconds later, so maybe not. But I am very confident that they filmed Stacy's torture scene because Jeffrey Wright confirms that there's parts missing from the opening.
But even here, there are a lot of shots missing. Hardcore shots that the people that acquired the project put out, I think, a very soft version of the film.
And because we see a quick flash of Stacy nailed to the trees, screaming after Brent finds her body. Meaning that at least part of it got filmed, and I wouldn't doubt all of it, because this would be at the very end of the torture when Marston is carving the word virgin into her belly. She's already been nailed to the tree at this point, and she's looking down at something before she starts screaming. But it's really awkwardly cropped upwards, and so is her body. The frame around Stacy while she's dead and tortured is focused around her shoulders and never goes any lower, unless we're too far away to make anything out. You can see what I think is the letter N when she's being zipped up into the body bag, but none of the other characters mention the fact that she has a word carved into her stomach in this scene. That is a very big thing to note. You would think that one of the cops would point it out, or that they would point it out after Annette is killed and the same thing was done to her. But no one says anything about it until the morgue scene. And even then, they say that the word virgin was carved into Annette's thigh.
As you can see on the inside left thigh, there's a 1-inch deep carving of the word virgin.
But her body is in frame, and I can see the word virgin on her stomach. Plus, if you go back to the quick flash of her body on the ceiling and pause, yeah, you can see it carved into her stomach. Clear as day. It's so fucking weird. Is the belly too inappropriate for general audiences, but the thigh is okay? It kind of makes things a little confusing that they're forced to hide the carving like this. It's a major part of the plot that isn't even acknowledged until after the third kill, and not clearly seen until the fourth. Like, Marlston is trying to get Brent to spill info on the case, and he's acting all weird about it, and then later feels so guilty about not telling people about the word virgin being at the crime scene.
Maybe Annette DeWolf would be alive today if I'd revealed details about the first two killings.
But we never got to see it at the crime scene. When Brent is standing in front of the class dodging Marlston's questions, we don't know what he's hiding. And I kind of wonder if the censorship regarding the word carved into the teens might be the reason that Rod's body is just kind of hidden in the bushes when the cops show up. In the shooting scripts, there's meant to be a V carved into his forehead. There's words carved into the principal's forehead too, but he's an adult, so maybe that's okay. But yeah, if the MPAA had an issue with the V, it would be a lot harder to crop out the forehead than it would be to crop out the belly. So maybe they were just forced to not show Rod's body at all. Censorship aside though, this opening scene really did terrify me when I was a child. Like, this was the part that haunted me my entire childhood. 5 years ago, I chalked it up to Stacy's death being really sad. And you know what? It totally is. Stacy does the smart thing and locks the doors after Rod is attacked, but he's outside horribly injured and calling out to her. And she just can't bear to listen to him suffer, so she tries to save him, and that's why she dies. It's actually kind of interesting that both Stacy and Annette die from essentially unlocking a door and letting the killer in, but neither actually come off as stupid for doing so. Stacy knows that she's making a bad decision. You can see it written all over her face, and she's deeply conflicted about whether or not she should help. Ultimately, it's her compassion that kills her. I think there's even an implication that Marlston was standing there letting Rod cry in pain to guilt Stacy into opening the door, since he pops up pretty much immediately after she does so. And it looks like initially they were planning on having Marlston do something similar to get Annette to open the door, but what they went with instead is Marlston pretending to be a friend of Annette's mother.
He didn't tell you I was coming by. No.
Annette is obviously extremely anxious when a stranger comes to her door while her parents are out, and also 2 of her classmates were just murdered, and is completely unwilling to let them into her house. But the stranger comes off as reasonable, saying that they have a note for her mom.
I must have just missed her. Can I leave a note?
And so Annette opens the door a crack, just enough to slip a piece of paper through.
Could you just slip it through the door, please?
She doesn't even take the chain off the door. She is trying really hard to be careful. But again, her trying to help a loved one ended up getting her killed. Now, Annette's death was actually the one that made me turn the movie off when I was a kid. I didn't even watch it. I wasn't kidding about crying in my friend's closet. I literally got up and ran away when the killer asked if Annette's mother was home.
Is your mom home? No.
I think my assessment 5 years ago that this scene scared me because my mom was starting to leave me home alone while simultaneously beating stranger danger into my head was right on. This was a representation of what could happen if a stranger came to your door and your parents aren't there to help you. As an adult, I'm not scared of being home alone anymore, so this scene doesn't scare me at all. But the opening still does. Whenever this movie pops into my head randomly, it's always the opening. It's always Stacy screaming in the car. Like, I literally drew this moment a few years back just because of the way it stuck in my head. I'm not really scared of the woods at night or serial killers anymore. Okay, well, that's not true. The movie where the dude feeds women to sharks made me cry a little bit. But I mean, I literally took a road trip by myself a few months ago, and it was totally fine. I wasn't even that worried about getting murdered. And I've watched a lot worse shit, so the fact that this still bothers me is kind of bizarre. I have a new theory now. Like, now that I've watched a shit ton more horror movies, I actually think that the reason this still affects me is the screaming. I think I'm just really disturbed by a good scream. Like in Hell House LLC, that girl Melissa, I swear to God, she's only got like 4 lines in the entire film. An absolute nothing of a character. No reason to care about her at all. But oh my God, at the end when she was screaming.
Joey! Joey, no! Joey, don't leave me, please! You hate us! No, this is embarrassing, Joe! Please get help!
Dude, I was like a mess of tears. I was so fucking angry that they chained her up like that and so upset that she died. I'm also squarely in the Toni Collette should have gotten an Oscar for Hereditary camp. Her screams during that one part are genuinely some of the most devastating things I've ever heard. Brie Blair is best known for being in the original Babysitters Club back in the 90s, where she also played a character named Stacy. What if they're the same person? Fucking tragic ass ending there. But she did a really good job for the short amount of time she gets in this film. Her screams are so fucking guttural and like so human.
No, run!
She's sobbing and there's like strings of saliva in her mouth. It's not pretty, but it feels real. Like this is what genuine terror looks like. I think she's an excellent actress. She was in a movie with Nicolas Cage that came out this year that I went out of my way to watch entirely because I love her, and it's extremely unfair that she hasn't become a huge star. What are we doing here, Hollywood? Well, she's a horror icon in my heart. And while I do acknowledge that had the torture scene remained in the film, I probably would have like dropped dead watching this at age 9. I am genuinely kind of offended on Brie Blair's behalf that it was cut. I bet she absolutely nailed it. No pun intended. I'm sure that she and the crew worked their absolute asses off on that scene, and it's just gone. It's lost media now that only I care about. I do have to question why Stacy in particular is singled out to receive so much torture though, like right in the beginning too. You know, like at least when the Terrifier movies have the big kill, it's typically in the middle. Like, if Annette's death was meant to be the extremely graphic one, that would be one thing. And actually, this one Variety review from the year 2000 does claim that Annette's death scene was originally over 5 minutes long before it had to be reshot. Which is really long for a movie kill, by the way. Like, the bedroom scene in Terrifier 2 is known for being an extremely long kill, and that scene's only about 3 minutes. The original 1998 script had Annette's death on screen, with the killer chasing her into her bedroom and then forcing her throat down onto a shard of glass. Not anything that would have taken 5 minutes to show, but obviously more than we ended up getting. But the way Annette's death was written in the shooting script is almost the exact same way it happens in the finished film. It looks like there were revisions, but no one in the commentary or interviews ever mentions reshoots. In fact, they had so little time to film that they couldn't even shoot everything that was in the script. Never mind redo an entire scene.
And then there was just a lot of the script that, because of problems in production, that didn't get filmed.
So I currently have no reason to think that a huge, disgusting torture scene was ever filmed for Annette. Whereas there's about 3 pages of Stacy getting tortured in the shooting script that is not in the film. Usually the point of the opening kill is to show the audience what the villain is capable of, so we know exactly what the protagonist is up against. And yes, Showing a teenage girl being slowly tortured to death does absolutely make your villain out to be a legitimate threat. But considering that none of the other deaths are that slow or graphic, I would imagine it would set a completely different tone than the rest of the movie actually has. The closest example of what I'm talking about would actually be the second Winnie the Pooh slasher movie. So the opening kill is Pooh and friends slaughtering this group of girls who are just trying to do a seance or something, I don't know. And for some reason they choose to break every single bone in this one girl's body, one at a time. And none of the other death scenes are remotely similar to this. There's actually a lot of decapitations, which, while gruesome, are extremely quick. There's not a lot of torture in this movie at all after the opening. So why this one girl? Why right up front? And the fact that the girls are being crucified is kind of bizarre when you think about it. I don't know if there's meant to be some kind of religious symbolism here, I don't know, Virgin Mary, the kids are paying for the sins of the town like Jesus did. Maybe there's something there if you squint at it. And apparently they were supposed to take Stacy's body down in a way that resembled Jesus being taken off of the cross. But if that was shot, it was taken out. But the way they're crucified doesn't resemble the typical crucifix pose at all. Stacy's left hand is lower than her right, and Annette is on the ceiling. Even the secretary was supposed to get crucified. Yeah, this absolute nothing of a character who got one line and acted kinda weird. In the shooting script, she's nailed to the principal in a sexual position. There's the obvious nailed joke, haha, yeah, movie about virgins getting nailed, but I actually think that there might be something a little deeper going on here. When Brent is explaining what actually happened to Loralee the night she was raped, it does become clear that the scene of her assault is eerily similar to the scene of Ron and Stacy's murders. It's the same car, lighting up the attack with its headlights, playing the same song on its radio.
No.
Loralee is pinned to the tree before the attack begins, just like Stacy was. And there is a shot of Loralee being laid out on a picnic table, one arm up higher than the other as the guys are getting ready to rape her. It's not an exact match to how Stacy was crucified, but considering everything else, I would say that Marston is recreating the assault that happened to his mother so many years ago. And that involves displaying the female victims in vulnerable positions, just like his mother was laid out. I think a really important element of understanding Cherry Falls that I didn't really consider last time around is that, at its core, it's a rape revenge movie. I mean, clearly, that is the killer's whole motive, to avenge his mother's horrifying assault. It's not structured much like a typical rape revenge movie. They usually follow a very simple structure of woman is out minding her own business, and then she gets raped, and then everyone involved in the rape gets brutally punished for it. The end. Now, the structure isn't set in stone or anything like that, but still, there's usually no opening kill. There's no whodunit mystery element. Hell, usually the killer in rape revenge movies are the protagonists, the rape survivor or her family who we follow the entire movie. We aren't meant to be terrified of them. We're supposed to be rooting for them. The person who's getting revenge is never the villain. They're the hero, albeit a flawed one. But not here. Cherry Falls is a rape revenge movie that has been smushed into the structure of a typical slasher movie. And that is really fascinating and deserves to be explored in depth. So, the film typically considered to be the first in the rape revenge genre is Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, which came out in 1960. This is actually an adaptation of a medieval Swedish ballad called Per Tershad's Daughters i Vinay, or Per Tershad's Daughters in Vinay. I'm so sorry about the pronunciation. The story goes that three sisters are walking to church when they're approached by three highwaymen. The highwaymen tell the sisters to marry them or die. The sisters choose death, so the highwaymen behead them. and 3 sprigs pop up where they die. The highwaymen then steal their shifts and try to sell them to the sisters' mother, Karen, who of course recognizes them and realizes that her daughters have been killed. She tells her husband, Père Terre Sean, and in a fit of rage, he murders 2 of the highwaymen. He then asks the third, "Who is your mother and father?" And the highwayman replies, "Karen and Père Terre Sean." And then Père Terre Sean is like, "Oh shit, I just killed my own sons." And then he builds a church to make up for what he did. The real-life 12th century Church of Carna. Bergman's adaptation of the story makes a lot of changes. For one, the highwaymen are no longer related to the family. They're just random criminals, and all 3 are murdered by the father this time instead of one being left alive to be questioned. This is a particularly interesting change because one of the criminals was severely aged down, like into a literal child. But I guess this makes sense because with the familial connection gone, this gives the father a reason to feel guilty about his killing spree.
Gud nåde mig för det jag gjort.
There's also only one daughter now, and her name is Karen, which was the mother's name in the original ballad. She is also now brutally raped before she is killed, the first of many rape scenes in this genre. Now, the original ballad doesn't specify that any sexual assault took place, but I mean, the sisters were killed for refusing the highwaymen's advances. It is somewhat present. This didn't come out of nowhere, and this was also super controversial and got censored in many countries. 12 years later, in 1972, Wes Craven adapted The Virgin Spring for American audiences, turning this spiritual story about guilt and redemption into an exploitation horror film called The Last House on the Left, where a teenage girl named Mary and one of her friends goes to a concert in the city only to be abducted and assaulted by a group of criminals who, after murdering the 2 girls in the woods, seek shelter at Mary's parents' house, which they broke down in front of in the biggest coincidence in the entire world. And then Mary's parents find out what happened and get brutal, bloody revenge on their daughter's killers. So, the bones of the original story are still there, and even some minor details carried over. The criminals have a kid with them, much like in The Virgin Spring, although here he's been aged up into a teenager. And the mother realizes that her daughter has been killed after discovering an article of her clothing, this time her necklace. There's also no spring popping up from the Virgin's death, but Mary does die in water as a little nod to it. Both versions of the story retain the idea of everyday ordinary people being pushed to their limits and committing unspeakable acts of violence, as well as the idea that revenge and violence is not the answer. However, while The Virgin Spring is looking at it from a moral and religious perspective, Last House on the Left is instead saying that revenge is bad because it's fruitless. The parents don't get any closure out of killing the criminals. Their child is still dead, and now they're probably going to spend the rest of their lives in jail. It's an absolute downer of a movie, but it's considered a classic to this day, and it was an early adapter of what ended up becoming a big topic in 1970s media, which is, rape. The 1970s was the first decade that rape was ever really talked about. The first rape crisis center was opened in San Francisco in 1971 after the founder's foster daughter had been sexually assaulted and felt that the doctors and police hadn't handled it well. Rape wasn't something that was handled very well by the police in general. In an article by the LA Times, Ray Root, who was a lieutenant in charge of Sacramento County's East Area Rapist Task Force, says, "I don't think rape was considered the horrendous crime that it's considered today, and that it was considered just another physical assault." The article then goes on to say that there were 9,522 reported rapes in California in 1976, but only 573 convictions, and some of those convictions just went straight to probation. Chris Pedretti, who was attacked by the East Area Rapist in 1976, talks openly in an article with SBS News about how she felt like she was continually victimized after her assault. First by the male police officers asking her very intimate questions, then by the people giving her the physical examination, and then by her parents, who did not allow her to talk about what happened to her. In 1974, a 22-year-old black woman named Joan Little, who was serving a sentence for breaking and entering, was sexually assaulted by a prison guard named Clarence Alligood, who had brought an ice pick into the cell to threaten her. During the attack, Little managed to grab the ice pick and stabbed Alligood before fleeing. She turned herself in a little over a week later, and she was charged with first-degree murder and faced the death penalty. However, many protests took place all over the United States in support of Little, and the autopsy backed up her story of self-defense, along with the fact that other women came forward that they had also been assaulted by Alligood. In the end, Little was found not guilty. Little's case is often cited as a reason for the anti-rape movement, that it opened many people's eyes to the horrors of rape and allowed for more open conversations about it. And those conversations ended up being portrayed in the media that was being made at the time. There were 2 made-for-TV movies that were specifically about dealing with the aftermath of a sexual assault. The first one is Cry Rape from 1973, which mostly focuses on a guy who was falsely accused of rape and the ways it ruins his life. I want to just point out that the title of this movie is extremely misleading. Like, Cry Rape is obviously a reference to The Boy Who Cried Wolf, where the boy lied about there being a wolf to get attention, but the victims in this movie didn't lie. They were actually raped. It's just that the rapist inexplicably looked exactly like another person, and the police happened to grab the wrong one. The victims are not demonized in this movie whatsoever. The movie is actually very sympathetic towards them. There's a lot of scenes where they're being questioned by the police who don't believe their story.
That's important, miss. Because if you consented, it's not rape.
I did not consent!
And their husbands blaming them for the assault.
Those tight slacks you wear and you're always showing all that cleavage, maybe you were asking for it.
And the defense tearing into the tiniest details of their lives to make it seem like they were asking for it.
Sometimes I draw the curtains and sometimes I don't.
Depending on what? Depending on whether you feel like playing games that night with whoever is passing along in the alley?
Ultimately, the movie is about how traumatizing and life-ruining it is to be blamed and treated like a criminal for something you didn't do, and something that isn't your fault. A Case of Rape premiered a year later in 1974, and it was a big deal at the time. It was the highest viewed TV movie at that point, and even got its star, Elizabeth Montgomery, an Emmy nomination. Yes, that Elizabeth Montgomery. She's probably a big reason this thing got so much attention. The plot of the movie is basically that a housewife named Ellen is raped by an acquaintance that she let into the house to use the phone. She's too ashamed to talk to the police, and her husband doesn't notice that anything's wrong. But after she's attacked a second time, the case is taken to court, where Ellen is subjected to the defense attorney, ripping her to shreds. Ellen is an extremely faithful and doting housewife, so literally the only thing that the defense has to attack her character is that she had sex with a man she was in a relationship with years before she got married.
You had an intimate relationship with him for nearly a year, isn't that true?
That was before I was married.
I didn't ask you when it was. I asked you, did you have a sexual relationship with him?
And that she was alone with a neighbor one time.
You went to his apartment, you lay down on his couch, and you still claim that nothing further went on between you and him?
That's right.
And how many others, Mrs. Harrod?
And that's enough to not only convince the jury that Ellen's rape was consensual,
we find the defendant not guilty,
but also make her husband doubt her.
I sit in there, and I want to believe you. But it's one thing after another.
And then the movie just kind of stops. Ellen threatens the rapist's life when he approaches her after the trial.
If you ever come near me again, I'll kill you.
but nothing comes of it. Voiceover narration tells us that the rapist attacked another woman shortly after and was shot by the police, and Ellen filed for divorce from her awful husband, but we don't see any of that happen. The movie has a lot of focus on Ellen's emotional state. Right after the first assault, Ellen keeps getting into the shower over and over again and just scrubbing herself down like she's trying to wash away the memory of the rape itself. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And by the end of the trial, Ellen has found a new self-confidence and has resolved to never feel ashamed by what happened to her again.
What I said in there about not being guilty, I meant it, and nobody is going to shame me into believing otherwise.
But we don't get to see how she deals with the aftermath of the trial or the hard decision to leave her husband. The official novelization added an epilogue where these plot points are woven into the dialogue, and they even added a line where Ellen expresses regret that she was unable to save the next girl from being attacked. Also, the book made it so that Ellen, randomly becomes a famous artist and is thriving after her divorce. Good for her. But none of this is in the movie. And to be fair, the point of this movie isn't to have a satisfying narrative. It's educational. It's supposed to start a conversation about a serious topic. The movie literally starts off by listing statistics.
It's estimated that every 12 minutes, a rape occurs somewhere in this country. Fewer than 1/4 of all rapes are reported to the police.
And it's repeated several times that it's basically impossible to get a rape conviction.
Well, you were raped twice by the same guy, which happens more than most people think. Try to convince a jury of that. Rape is the toughest felony conviction going. Never try a rape case. Unless it's a 90-year-old nun and she's got a minimum of 4 stab wounds.
And that is the note that this movie ends on. The justice system failed again. It's a regular occurrence. This is going to keep happening unless we do something about it. 2 years later, in 1976, the movie Lipstick came out, and it's very similar to A Case of Rape. The basic plot is that a woman gets raped by an acquaintance that she lets into her house. It goes to court. She is absolutely ripped to shreds by the defense, and her rapist is found not guilty. They even have some smaller details in common, like someone witnessing the rape, but the defense forcing them to admit they weren't sure it was rape at the time.
Absolutely certain that it was a rape, could you?
Well,
Absolutely certain?
not absolutely.
I didn't know.
You would have called for help if she'd been in danger.
Yes.
You would have telephoned the police.
Yes.
Anyone, wouldn't you?
The prosecutors in both films being extremely harsh to the survivors so that they'll understand how hard the defense is going to go on them.
That's just a small sample of what you can expect from the defense.
I'm sorry I had to do that to you. I had to find out. You're going to be a terrific witness.
And that both movies end abruptly after a not guilty verdict is given in court. However, unlike in A Case of Rape, where it was the rapist that was found not guilty, in Lipstick, it's the protagonist, Chris.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty as judged.
Now, on the surface, Chris and Ellen are extremely different people. Ellen is a meek, sheltered housewife whose family is constantly worried about money, whereas Chris is a rich and famous supermodel, played by the real-life supermodel Margot Hemingway. However, despite the fact that these two characters are living extremely different lives, they still have the exact same horrific act forced upon them, and have the exact same struggles trying to get justice. Chris's fame doesn't help her in the courtroom. In fact, it actually makes things more difficult in some ways. The defense attorney in A Case of Rape had to stretch hard to find anything to frame Ellen as sexually promiscuous. Chris literally poses nude as a job, and the defense frames it like she couldn't possibly have been raped because of this fact.
You invite this young man to watch you going through these erotic daydreams of being raped and being overwhelmed, to see these sexual fantasies on the beach. And the very next afternoon, you invite this young man to your apartment. And you expect this jury to believe that he had to brutalize you to make you perform these self-same sexual acts?
And as a result, Chris's rapist is found not guilty, just like Ellen's was. However, unlike A Case of Rape, lipstick keeps going, and we get to see most of what Chris is dealing with after the verdict. Her relationship with her boyfriend has crumbled, and she's struggling hard at her job, now clearly associating modeling with her assault and the trauma she went through in the courtroom.
Please let me try it one more time, Francesco. I'll be all right in a minute.
Meanwhile, her rapist is doing fucking fantastic. He's getting his job back as a teacher, he's being allowed around young girls, no problem, and just like in A Case of Rape, he reoffends. But this time, we get to see it happen. And it, unfortunately, happens to Chris's younger sister. Now, before the trial starts, the prosecuting attorney says that the point of the justice system isn't so much to punish criminals, but to protect the people under their jurisdiction. And the people of California would be a lot safer if a violent rapist was put behind bars.
You know, she doesn't win the case. The people of the state of California do, to protect them from a rapist.
But the justice system fails. The rapist is released, and he goes on to hurt someone that Chris loves. And since Chris now knows that the justice system won't protect them, she takes things into her own hands and gets rid of him herself. She doesn't just threaten to kill the rapist, she actually does it. And she's the one who shoots the rapist in this movie, not the police. And she gets away with it. The jury finds her not guilty for murder, which is, reminiscent of the Joan Little trial. Obviously, there's some major differences here, between the races and the socioeconomic classes. And Little's was a clear-cut case of self-defense, while Chris is just openly shooting a man in the street in broad daylight. But considering that Little was acquitted about a year before Lipstick was released, I could see how it might have inspired the ending. There's also the 1974 movie Act of Vengeance, sometimes called Rape Squad, which has a scene of the main character being forced to answer extremely uncomfortable questions at the police station.
Now, was there actual penetration? Clearly say no at the time of first body contact.
And she's forced to go through an extremely invasive examination, only for them to tell her that they didn't find enough evidence to show she was actually raped.
Sperm is evidence of rape.
Well, does that mean that if there is no sperm, then it didn't...
No, not necessarily. But look, the law...
No, wait a minute, just...
And then to add insult to injury, the lead detective basically just tells the women who were attacked that it's impossible to find the rapist, and they should stop bugging them about it.
Don't you see, even if we got lucky and brought him in here and put him up there, there's no way you could identify him, except by his voice. And he could easily disguise that.
This leads to all the survivors coming together to create a community task force to protect women in their neighborhoods from predators. And it gets so successful, many women call them instead of the police. Speaking of the police being useless, 1974's Death Wish. Paul is trying to get the police to find the guys who killed his wife and raped his daughter, and the police are just like, sorry, it's probably not going to happen.
I'd be less than honest if I gave you more hope, Mr. Kersey. In the city, that's the way it is.
And so Paul ends up taking to the streets to enact his own justice. This movie has some crazy-ass politics I don't agree with, but regardless, in this universe, Paul does a better job cleaning up crime than the police. So much so that the police literally end up running him out of town.
We want you to get out of New York. Permanently.
Even Last House on the Left has the parents reporting to the police that their daughter never came home, and the police just completely dismissing their concerns.
You know, kids get ants in their pants sometimes. She's just letting off a little steam.
And then as they're leaving, they notice a strange car broken down in front of the house, and they literally just go, oh yeah, no, that's not our problem.
Looks like someone got stuck. Wanna go out and have a look? No. Come on, let's go here. We got more important things to do. That ain't gonna find us very common.
When they finally realize that the car is, in fact, their problem, they somehow fuck up so badly that a 30-minute drive to the Collingwood's house takes them 6 hours, at least. And they arrive just in time to arrest Mary's parents for murder, after essentially leaving them to deal with this situation by themselves. A Clockwork Orange from 1971 has a rape revenge scene, just one part where a man avenges the rape of his wife. And the movie as a whole is super critical of the justice system. The minister wants to use Alex as a political ploy, and so locks away the man accusing him of raping his wife.
He formed this idea in his head that you had been responsible for the death of someone near and dear to him. He was a menace. We put him away for his own protection.
And gives Alex a good job in exchange for his cooperation, knowingly rewarding a rapist in order to get cheap political points. It's a pretty consistent theme in these early rape revenge movies, or 70s rape movies in general. The justice system doesn't care about victims or their families, and in some cases actually makes things worse for the victims and their families. And if the justice system isn't going to protect you, well, then you're going to have to protect yourself. In 1974, filmmaker Mayer Zarchi was driving through a park with his friend and young daughter when they discovered a woman who had been raped. Zarchi decided that the best thing to do was to take her to the police first, so that they could catch the rapist before they could hurt anyone else.
My daughter, 8-year-old daughter, will play in the park. Those guys can do the same thing to her. And maybe they're still around. Maybe the police can capture them.
But he came to regret that decision after seeing the way the police treated the victim. Zarchi felt as if he was watching the woman be completely re-traumatized, describing the feeling as if he was watching the rape continue in the police station.
As he was pounding and pounding her with these questions, I felt that the raping of this girl had not stopped. It was just transferred from that park into this police station, and was continuing right in front of my eyes.
This inspired him to write a story where a woman was raped and didn't go to the police, instead choosing to take justice into her own hands. He called it Day of the Woman and filmed it in Kent, Connecticut in 1975 with giallo actress Camille Keaton playing the lead role of Jennifer Hills. Zarchi was initially unable to find a distributor and so distributed it himself, playing it in a number of small screenings in 1978 before it was eventually picked up by the Jerry Gross organization, who changed the name to I Spit on Your Grave and advertised the film as a sleazy exploitation flick, with Demi Moore's ass on the poster. Yes, this is actually Demi Moore. She confirmed it in her memoir. And unfortunately, she was about 16 when this photo was taken. Obviously, that's pretty dodgy, but the actual movie itself garnered a really fucking awful reputation for one really big reason. There is a 30-minute rape scene. Literally, about a third of this movie is a rape scene. This, bothered some people. It was called misogynistic. Siskel and Ebert notoriously hated it and said it was the worst movie ever made.
Worst movie I've seen is called I Spit on Your Grave.
Siskel was literally standing outside of theaters trying to convince people not to watch it. And yeah, it did end up getting pulled out of some theaters and outright banned in some countries. But because of this, when home media became a thing and the movie suddenly became available on VHS, a lot of people started buying and renting it out of pure curiosity.
The movie quickly climbed to the Billboard's top 40 best-selling videocassettes list for 14 consecutive weeks. Billboard included I Spit on Your Grave in their #1 award for the 100 best-selling videocassettes of 1981.
And so the movie became a huge hit. Now, Mayer Zarchi was not happy about the way his movie was marketed, especially the title.
I'll never forget when he called me one day and he said, "May, we decided to change the title to I Spit on Your Grave." My heart sank, and I even became pale. I said, "What? What kind of title is that?"
When they announced to me that the new title was I Spit in Your Grave, I instantly hated it, and I still do to this day.
Supposedly he got over it because the new title did get name dropped in the official sequel 40 years later.
I spit on Johnny's grave.
but the entire point of the movie was supposed to be to empower women. I Spit on Your Grave is often credited as the first rape revenge movie where the woman gets revenge for herself. Even people who worked on I Spit on Your Grave talk about it like that.
Very, very few films existed where the female gets revenge.
The fact that most movies that are of that genre, there's usually the male, someone who is a friend of the person who gets taken advantage of, will come back and seek revenge. And this was done with the woman, and that had never really been done before, and I like that very much about the film.
But in reality, I think that honor actually goes to 1964's Das Phantom von Soho.
All die Männer, die sich an Ihnen vergingen, die haben Sie getötet.
Bestraft. Und ihnen das zurückgegeben, womit sie mich bezahlen wollten. Ich lebte nur noch für meine Rache.
And even if we're just strictly talking about America, I think that would be Linda in Act of Vengeance in 1974, bashing her rapist tenant with a shovel. But regardless, yes, it is true that before I Spit on Your Grave, it was extremely common to have the victim's loved ones, usually her parents, get the revenge. And after I Spit on Your Grave, it became more common for the woman to get revenge for herself. No longer do we have the dead-eyed, grieving parents sobbing and fruitlessly trying to comfort each other once the police arrive to arrest them. Now we got Jennifer Hills happily listening to one rapist bleeding to death and smirking at the camera after chopping another up with his own boat.
Suck it, bitch.
Revenge is empowering now. Hell yeah. The debate whether I Spit on Your Grave is a feminist movie has been raging for decades. Carol J. Clover, best known for coining the term final girl, defended the film in her book Men, Women, and Chainsaws, and many critics have changed their tune the past few decades, with many people now claiming that the movie is feminist. But still, many other people criticize this movie for how long and exploitative the rape scene is, especially in comparison to how quick most of the revenge is, and the fact that Jennifer Hills has sex with a couple of her rapists before she kills them.
I let Matthew kiss and at me before I killed him. And you know what?
I'm guessing that this criticism in particular really bothered Zarchi because it was addressed directly in the 2019 I Spit on Your Grave sequel.
How could you choose to give them, how shall I put it, the ultimate pleasure of life before you killed them? I wanted them to be as vulnerable as I was when they assaulted me. As you can imagine, Reverend, I do not have the physical strength of my rapist.
Now, it's not really up to me to decide what's empowering and what isn't. That's a matter of individual taste. But I will say that I personally believe that most people do like rape revenge stories in some capacity. I was never into the Twilight series, but I was a teenage girl in the 2010s. I heard about it a lot. I absorbed it through osmosis, and one thing I always heard was that people really liked what Rosalie did to her rapists.
I got my revenge on them. One at a time. Saved Royce for last so he'd know I was coming.
I reached out to some people that I knew were into the Twilight series back then, since this would have probably been the first rape revenge story people my age would have encountered. And the general consensus seems to be that they didn't really get what happened to her since they were young at the time, but as adults they get it and might do the same thing if they were in her shoes. And also that it made them actually like Rosalie, since beforehand they just kind of thought that she was a bitch. I think that a lot of people, women in particular, either have been abused or assaulted, or else live in fear of it happening to them, and are used to their mistreatment being completely overlooked and ignored. So it can be cathartic to see a woman show genuine rage and go after the person who mistreated her. Not even in just a rape revenge sense either. Like Margot in The Menu attacking Tyler after he set her up to die feels very right to me.
I have a thing about feminine rage, which people think, for some reason, and this is with no disrespect to any writer, I get a lot of men doing really terrible things and women sitting silently whilst one tear slowly falls. And I'm like, oh, no, we get mad and angry. And I remembered pulling Mark aside and saying, I'm really sorry, but the only way to play this truthfully is for me to attack him. And he was like, oh, you mean like this? And I was like, no, I'm gonna
have at him.
Or in the movie Fresh, everyone I've showed this movie to cheered when Noah bit off Steve's dick. And of course, there were a lot of women who felt catharsis at the end of Midsommar when Dani chose to burn her shitty-ass boyfriend alive. Midsommar's often called a good for her movie, despite this not being a good ending for Dani at all. It just emotionally feels right to anyone who's ever been through an awful breakup. I think the thing that kind of complicates rape revenge movies being empowering, though, is that oftentimes they just come off as exploitative. I mean, asking a person who has experienced sexual violence to sit through a 30-minute rape scene is a huge fucking ask. And even in less extreme examples, it is very obvious that a lot of times the movie wasn't directed with a female audience in mind. Like in Act of Vengeance, they're trying to say, oh, isn't it so wrong that these poor women are being gawked at and sexualized by these gross men?
We were just trying to be funny.
Well, your smart-ass remarks stink. You treat women like slabs of meat.
But then a few scenes later, the movie films these women just having a conversation, naked, tits out, bush out. There is an interesting scene in this film too where the women dye a guy's penis blue and they just do not show it.
And if we ever hear that you attacked any other woman, this will identify you and we'll be back.
No problem at all showing full female nudity, but suddenly they're very shy about male nudity. I Spit on Your Grave does show at least a little bit of male nudity, if you look really close in some scenes. But in the retrospective documentary that came out in 2019, the director says that they considered showing Johnny's dick after Jennifer cuts it off, but that they decided it's more effective to leave some stuff to the imagination.
Well, there's much more power to the theater of the mind.
Yeah, it's in the head.
Theater of the mind, that it's in your imagination rather than having it thrown in your face.
Yeah.
But that kind of consideration wasn't brought into the 30-minute rape scene. And the distribution company didn't stick underage Demi Moore on the cover of their VHS tape thinking it was going to attract women to watch it. Although, to be completely fair, Jennifer's never dressed like this in the movie. This was entirely just for the cover. I Spit on Your Grave is shockingly kind of respectful in how it films Jennifer. There's this really fascinating shot early on where she's skinny dipping in the river, and we aren't allowed to have a good look at her. The camera is even positioned behind some branches, and then she gets in the water and it immediately zooms out so we can't see anything. This is the first time we see any kind of nudity in the film, and it's a subversion of the male gaze. We aren't allowed to ogle at the naked woman. Instead, we're treated as if we're intruding on a private moment and are immediately removed. And the nudity in the rest of the film is extremely frank. It isn't filmed in a way to be sexy. You aren't supposed to enjoy the rape scene. The extreme length is in order to put you in the same shoes as the victim, that you just desperately want it to be over, but it just keeps going.
I hope that its effect on you is as overwhelming as it is on me, because I made this movie with the intention to create a mini earthquake in your head, to put you in Jennifer's place, to make you feel and experience the agony and pain that she was subjected to. They denounce and condemn it because it makes them sick to their stomachs. What did they expect the film about rape to be? Enjoyable to watch?
This movie, this scene, this is the only time I've ever gotten physically ill watching a movie. Okay, I didn't actually puke, but I was shaking and hunched over a trash can the next morning at work. Just God, this scene. It never ends. The part where she's about to call for help, but the phone is abruptly kicked away. And then they just start assaulting her again. This was genuinely one of the most painful moments I have ever experienced watching a film. So yes, in my personal experience, the scene did the job it set out to do. And considering this movie was made in the 1970s and was based on the horrible attitudes the local law enforcement had towards rape victims, maybe the extreme length felt necessary. Maybe rubbing it in people's faces, how awful and painful it is, and how much the woman was not asking for it and not enjoying it, seemed like the best way to get the audience to care about the topic. However, respectful as it may be filmed, and as good as the intentions may be, it doesn't take away the fact that there are some people who will watch I Spit on Your Grave and movies like it and enjoy the violence towards the women too much. This was something that Ebert kept bringing up in his reviews, that there were people in the theater with him who were cheering during the rape scene.
I went to see I Spit on Your Grave, and I was sitting next to a fairly nicely dressed middle-aged man, maybe in his 50s or 60s, who was talking back to the screen with lines like, "Boy, she's really asking for it now," or, you know, "There's a rape scene coming up, this'll be a good one," and so forth.
And again, the distributors were clearly banking on people finding it sexy, considering the poster they chose to go with. And I can personally attest to this myself, because I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but YouTube creators are able to see what people were looking up when they found their video. And some people found my original video while looking up rape scene. It's not a lot of people, to be fair, but also not a lot of people watched that video. But yeah, I also didn't censor the original video pretty much at all. That was a really big mistake I made at the time. And this makes me uncomfortable, so that's why the video is unlisted. And why every rape scene I'm showing in this video is either just a still frame or an incomprehensible blur. And this is something that goes against the whole idea of the rape revenge genre. The main defense of this genre, and the main reason people seem to like it, is because of the catharsis. The woman is tortured, so that way you empathize with her and feel like the people she is killing deserve it. And the people who like the rape scene a little bit too much are addressed in the I Spit on Your Grave documentary, where it said that the dudes who identified with the rapists are essentially punished for it in the castration scene.
They were hooting, howling, "Get her, fuck the shit out of her, fuck the shit out of her." Then, once she got the first guy and got him back, it was dead silence, like we were sitting in an empty movie theater of our own, like they themselves had just been castrated or something.
If guys want to howl and love watching a scene of a girl getting raped, then they equally have to enjoy the comeuppance of these guys.
This is something I think the movie Teeth does really well. In case you aren't aware, the entire premise of Teeth is that a girl has teeth in her vagina. This is one of those movies where I read the summary on Wikipedia when I was 14 and I was like, what the fuck? But yeah, anyone who might like the rape scenes in this movie aren't going to be enjoying themselves long, because the rapists immediately get their dicks bitten off in the most graphic way possible. And not only that, but the rapists and creeps are mocked and demeaned by the movie.
Hardly seems worth it.
The universe keeps kicking them while they're down. And you don't feel bad for them because, well, damn, maybe you shouldn't be assaulting people. You completely did this to yourself. You know, I've talked in the past about how scared I was to watch the Saw movies because I knew that there was a scene where a lady gets her scalp ripped off, and that's something I'm really squeamish about. However, last October, I did finally watch all of them, and I have to say, the scalping scene really did lose its edge for me when it turned out that the woman it was happening to was a human trafficker. Just ugh. If it has to happen to someone, you know? And then a little bit later, an actual rapist gets all of his limbs ripped off, and it's like, yeah, good. Fuck him. Even the cops that show up afterwards are like, yeah, anyone would kill this guy if they knew what he did.
Look at these women and tell me how you feel.
Enraged.
Exactly.
Making a character into a rapist is the quickest and most efficient way to make them unlikable. And as such, you can get away with giving them extremely painful deaths. And rape revenge movies definitely take advantage of this to have some crazy brutal kills. Like, I remember seeing a Letterboxd review for the movie Bad Reputation saying that rape revenge movies should not have the survivor shoving something up her rapist's ass. Baby girl, that happens in like every rape revenge movie.
You know that cute little pistol that you got? It ain't shiny no more, cause it's in your ass.
The 2010 I Spit on Your Grave remake, along with its 2 sequels, have some of the most brutal kills I have ever seen. Terrifier 3 wasn't the first movie to slice a dick in half is all I'm saying. The 2010's I Spit on Your Grave movies are interesting because you can tell that they had no idea how to turn this into a franchise. The second movie actually features a completely different girl getting assaulted. Most likely they were planning on doing an anthology series where every movie would be a different rape revenge story before doubling back in the third movie and going back to Jennifer being the protagonist. And the second movie did take the unfortunate direction of trying to top the first movie. Not only with the kills, which is a completely normal thing to happen with horror movies, but also with the rape scenes, which just feels wrong. Like, it's one thing to make kill scenes more and more over the top. A lot of the time it just turns into a spectacle of special effects, and usually it turns out so unrealistic it's hard to be offended by it. But rape scenes are pretty much just a woman being violated for minutes on end, and it comes off as extremely exploitative and overly cruel to add extra torture to that. Like the dude who plays Art the Clown in the Terrifier movies, which are infamously some of the most graphic and gory slasher movies ever made, has stated that he would never want to do a sexual assault scene in those movies because it would be crossing a line. So it is different. Rape is genuinely considered one of the worst things one person could do to another, and you really don't have to show that much of it for the horror to come through. One interesting thing I've noticed while watching all these movies is that the rape revenge movies made by women typically still do have rape scenes, but they're zoomed in on the victims' faces. They aren't stripped naked, you hardly even see their bodies at all. Instead, the focus is entirely on their facial expressions. And that makes perfect sense to me. If you want to get across the horror of being assaulted, what better way than to focus on the emotions of the victim? Sometimes you don't even have to show anything at all. Whereas I Spit on Your Grave 2, I'd argue crosses a couple of lines during its rape scenes. Its follow-up, I Spit on Your Grave 3, doesn't have a rape scene at all. Aside from a few flashes back to the 2010 movie, there is no on-screen sexual assault in this movie. The main character's best friend is murdered off-screen. We don't get to see it happen. We don't see a body. We don't even get any details on what happened to her.
Was she assaulted?
I can't really discuss specifics of the case.
But regardless, Jennifer's killing spree afterwards feels completely justified. There's also a teenage girl in the support group Jennifer attends who is actively being abused by her stepfather. And again, we never see it happen, but we do see her crying and expressing how it makes her feel.
I can't take it anymore. You know, she pretends like she can't hear it, but it hurts.
And it's awful. It's so awful it literally triggers the other characters in the support group. It straight up triggers Jennifer into killing the stepfather. And again, it feels justified because we saw the pain he caused even if we didn't see the abuse happen. Or even take the movie Barbarian from 2022. Tess finds a secret hallway in her Airbnb and discovers a room with a stained bed, a bucket, and a camera. And that's it. The audience immediately understands what happened in this room. Similarly, too, there's a scene later on in the same movie with all these tapes. We never get to see what's on them, but they're all titled stuff like Gas Station Girl, Puker, Won't Stop Crying. Yeah. Literally, I've seen people say that these tapes are the most disturbing part of the movie, despite the fact that we never get to see what's on them. Just the implications behind the titles is more than enough. Rape revenge movies aren't even feeling the need to show the rape anymore. Both 2017's 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, and 2020's Promising Young Women take place after the assault has happened, and there's no flashback to it. You're told just enough to understand what happened, and that's more than sufficient to make the main character and their quest for vengeance sympathetic. And this isn't to say that there should never be rape scenes in movies. I think there definitely are times when it makes sense to include one, like in Lipstick and other movies like it, where the point is to show how badly victims are treated. It really hammers home how cruelly the defense is treating the survivors in twisting their words and trying to frame the assault as consensual, when we got to see it with our own eyes and saw how much the survivors suffered and tried to fight back. And sometimes it makes thematic sense too, like in The Brutalist. I just feel like rape is an extremely sensitive subject, and most people feel so intrinsically disgusted and angry about it that you really don't have to show that much in order to get an emotional reaction. Much like people feel about killing a puppy. There didn't need to be a 30-minute sequence of the puppy being tortured to death in John Wick for the audience to feel angry about it. In fact, the puppy's death is mostly off-screen. All you need to hear is that little yelp. And that's it. We want those assholes dead. We don't see Shoshana's family members being shot to death in Inglourious Bastards. It's all done from above the floor. And hell, the main character, Aldo Rain's entire mission in the movie is to kill as many Nazis as possible, and he doesn't have any kind of a tragic backstory about why he would hate them. The movie doesn't need to revel in the suffering of Jewish people. The audience just understands that Nazis are bad and deserve to die. You know, Nazis, rapists, puppy killers, the 3 kinds of people typically seen as the scum of the earth that you don't have to justify killing in movies because the audience already probably hates them. And as such, their deaths are automatically seen as satisfying. You know, in Ebert's review of I Spit on Your Grave, he always mentions the people cheering inside the theater. Of course you have the men cheering during the rape.
This guy is, to my way of thinking, a vicarious sex criminal. He has very antisocial attitudes. I felt creepy sitting there.
But there was also a woman cheering while Jennifer gets her revenge. And Ebert always talks about this woman as if it's on the same level as distasteful as the men cheering. But I don't think that's fair. In their worst movies of 1980 list, Siskel and Ebert show a clip of the rapists mocking the book that Jennifer wrote, incorrectly calling it her journal for some reason.
In this scene, after they've attacked her, they make fun of the journal she's been keeping,
and using it as an example of how cruelly the movie relishes in the torture of its female lead.
The people who made this film should really be ashamed of themselves, and so should the people who booked it and the people who went to see it. It's really an inhuman, sick film.
But what they don't show is that the rapists destroy the book right in front of her, and then after the rapists leave, Jennifer spends a long time cleaning herself up, resting and healing, and then once she starts to feel better, she tapes her book back together and continues working on it. This is probably the best part of the movie for me because it gives an added layer of depth to both the rape and the revenge. Her book is in pieces, it's crudely taped back together, it's never going to be the same as it was before the assault. And in a similar vein, Jennifer isn't the same person who wrote the book anymore. But she's not giving up on it. She came to this cabin to write her book, and she still intends on doing that. She just can't do it until the people who tried to destroy both her and her book are gone. This is something the remake just completely ignored. Jennifer just completely gave up on being a writer after the assault and focused her entire life afterwards on revenge. But the original 1978 Jennifer still wants to live her life and fulfill her dreams. She just needs to get justice before she is able to do that. This is essentially the point of revenge movies, at least the ones where the revenge is meant to be satisfying. To show the person who's lost everything take their agency back, get their life back. John Wick gets a new puppy, a pit bull, often considered a dangerous breed by nature, that is scheduled to die, and John takes it home with him so that they can help each other find the goodness he knows is inside both of them and maybe finally live a normal life. Beatrix in Kill Bill gets her child back, but more importantly, saves them both from the cycle of violence and vengeance that she's been plagued with since she met Bill. Jennifer in I Spit on Your Grave now finally feels safe to move on with her life, to write her book, and to follow her dreams without the threat and trauma of her rapists breathing down her neck. The man in the screening of I Spit on Your Grave was cheering on someone being brutalized and objectified by people who relished in her misery, whereas the woman was cheering on someone who managed to come back on top after facing unspeakable adversity. This makes Cherry Falls an extremely unique entry in the genre, because the people that Marston are getting his revenge on aren't the people who wronged his mother. Rod, Stacy, Annette, Timmy, none of them had anything to do with the assault. None of them were even alive when it happened, which is very common for slasher movies. You know, like, the killer coming to town decades later to kill the children of the people who wronged him is very Nightmare on Elm Street. And that's totally fine for a slasher movie, but if we're viewing this film through the perspective of a rape revenge story, it's kind of unheard of. Which isn't to say that random people don't get killed in rape revenge movies, because no, that happens all the time. Both Paul from Death Wish and Thana from Miss 45 turn to vigilante justice and literally wander around New York City looking for criminals to shoot to death. Sometimes not even criminals, like Thana is literally killing any man she deems creepy and inappropriate. We see a version of this too in I Spit on Your Grave 3, when Jennifer completely spirals and starts to believe that all men are rapists. She's literally wandering the streets at night, dressed all sexy-like, attacking any man that approaches her, even if they're literally just trying to help.
Buy me a drink.
I think you've already had a few. Let me give you a ride home.
But Jennifer genuinely does believe that these guys are dangerous and that she's doing a public good in getting rid of them, just as Thana and Paul believe they're cleaning up the streets and taking care of their communities. In their minds, none of their victims are innocent. American Mary has a scene where Mary very nearly snaps and kills an innocent woman, but she decides at the last minute that she doesn't deserve to die and lets her go.
You know what? Don't worry about it.
And she shows a lot of remorse after she's forced to kill a security guard.
Are you upset?
Of course I'm upset.
How about the two dead guys?
It affects me.
Now, if we're specifically talking about children being killed in these movies, well, obviously you got the kid in the Virgin Spring, who was involved, you know, like he did trip her, and he did just sit there and watch it happen, but he was also like 10. He obviously couldn't have stopped it. And the dad is absolutely racked with guilt over killing this kid, obviously realizing that was a step too far. In more recent years, though, both Promising Young Woman and the 2010 I Spit on Your Grave remake have the main girl lure away the daughter of someone involved in the assault, in order to get across the message of, oh yeah, it's not so cool when it's your daughter who's in danger, huh?
That's why I know you won't mind, but 3 hours ago, I picked your daughter, Amber, up from school and introduced her to the boys who live in that room now.
What? Imagine that somebody had done something like this to her.
But the daughter is let go completely unharmed. I think. We don't actually ever see what happens to her in the 2010 I Spit on Your Grave remake, but it's very heavily implied that she's fine, she's good. Jennifer and Cassie's beef is with the kid's parent, not the kid themselves.
Relax. Dean Walker, do you really think I would do something like that?
Innocent people are almost never killed by the survivors or their families in rape revenge stories. The people whom the survivor or their family kills always deserve it in some way. That's kind of the point. Even in Das Phantom von Soho, which also has a sort of slasher movie whodunit structure similar to Cherry Falls, the killer literally only attacks people involved in her assault. As she expresses genuine grief when an innocent person dies due to her actions.
Blieb mir ein treuer Diener. Hat sich lieber getötet, als mich verraten.
And what's nuts, too, is that Loralee was raped by 4 people.
That claim she was raped by 4 drunken seniors.
But Marlston only kills 2 of them. We don't even find out what happened to the other 2, just that they left town.
2 of the guys left town about a year after that.
They were apparently supposed to have died off screen. In the script, Marlston mentions he killed them years ago, but this was removed for sequel potential, which is unfortunate, you know, as it just kind of leaves this weird, unaddressed gap in the narrative. This obviously takes the catharsis element out of the rape scene too. I mean, for one thing, it showed at the end of the movie instead of the beginning, and it showed after most of the revenge has taken place. Even in movies like Blink Twice, where the fact that the characters have been getting assaulted isn't revealed till the end, we still see it before the actual revenge. So there is still the catharsis of seeing the rapist die, even if it happens super late. Not here though, because most of the killings happened like 40 minutes ago. And not only that, but we don't really get to see any of the guys who did the assault get punished for it. As we know in the finished movie, only 2 of the rapists die. Both are off screen, and I don't think the principal's death is like that for censorship reasons. It seems like it was written like that. And the other dies a hero's death. Brent dies slowing the killer down, giving his child a chance to escape. Which means that a rapist is portrayed as being heroic in this rape revenge movie. That's kind of insane. Now, the original Cherry Falls script did not have a rape scene. What happened to Loralee that night was just meant to be described to Jody by Marlston right before he abducts her, and not even in any detail. Showing the actual assault was a Jeffrey Wright addition.
And he added the actual flashback rape scene. That was the biggest change he made to the script, that in the original script, there wasn't a flashback.
And despite how much stuff got scrapped due to time limitations, they did go out of their way to shoot the rape scene. So obviously Wright must have thought that the scene was important to show. And since it isn't functioning the way scenes like this usually do in rape revenge narratives, I can think of a few different reasons why its inclusion might be important. One is obviously to show that Marlston is recreating the scene of the assault. I mentioned this a while ago, and I do think it adds some depth to the kills, which is good. I do wish that they might have gone a bit further with it though. Like I said before, it would be cool as hell if the way Stacy was crucified was the exact pose Loralee was laid down in. But it's not. Similarly, Marlston rubs Rod's blood all over Stacy's lips, and on the second or third watch through, I jumped forward to the rape scene to see if Loralee was wearing lipstick during the assault, because that would have been a really cool detail. But no, it doesn't appear that she is. But Marlston is wearing lipstick while dressed like Loralee. That's said directly.
Why are you wearing lipstick?
Marlston isn't even really dressed like she was that night. I mean, he's wearing dark clothes and a wig, but she's wearing a white button-down shirt, brown skirt, and a long baggy coat. Not the freaky leather ensemble Marlston chose to wear to dress like her. I like the idea in theory, I just wish in practice they took more steps into incorporating the details into the flashback. Another reason for showing this scene would be to humanize Loralee, which I do think is important. Considering what a major part of the narrative she isn't really there all that much, and we don't find out a lot about her. We don't even know if she's dead or alive. In the original script, she's dead, but there's absolutely no mention of it at all in the finished movie. There is someone watching Brent in Loralee's house, and someone standing across the street at the end, but otherwise, we're left completely in the dark on what Loralee is currently up to, which, again, leaves this weird hole in the movie because, like, Marlston's entire motivation is getting revenge for her. Where is she? How does she feel about this? Why is Marlston the one getting revenge and she's not doing it for herself? They just don't tell us. Granted, there are plenty of rape revenge stories where it's the family or friends of the victim who get revenge, and there have even been movies where the victim is dead before the movie even begins. And we don't learn a lot about the victims in those movies either. But at least in those movies, they do tell us if the victim is dead or not.
Is your friend okay? No, she's not.
And we also know that the main character is getting revenge for their loved one because they, well, loved them. They're so grief-stricken and angry at what happened to the person they love that they can't move on without trying to get their own form of justice. Marlston doesn't seem to like Loralee all that much. We don't get a sense of affection from him when he speaks about her. He honestly seems more angry that the rape seemingly turned Loralee into an absolute monster who beat and abused him through his entire childhood.
And after you raped her, there was no one to tell. Except me.
It's even implied that before the assault, Loralee wasn't a super nice person. In every version, Marge says some iteration of, "Oh, no one liked Loralee. She was weird and mean."
And she was just this loner that nobody cared for. And she just thought she was smarter than everybody.
And she also says in both scripts that before the assault, Loralee called the guys something homophobic. Obviously, Marge isn't reliable, and in fact, she does kind of use this to explain the assault. Like, oh, they raped her in order to prove that they weren't gay. But in the film, Brent is the one that says that Loralee said that, and we actually get to see it in the flashback.
She called Tom a homo.
So we can assume that's an actual thing that happened. Now, one good thing about showing the assault is that the way that this interaction is performed, it kind of gives this little moment context. Like, it wasn't just an out-of-nowhere insult. We're showing the guys harassing her and touching her. Brent says they were teasing her, that they were making her feel unsafe.
Tom told her to get into his car, but she wouldn't do it.
And that she said what she said out of anger.
And then she got mad. She called Tom a homo. And then she just took off.
And it totally looks like that. She looks scared and uncomfortable, and that she probably just said the meanest things she could think of in retaliation before trying to get away from them. But even if Loralee was a nasty homophobe, even if she was a weird, angry loner that was mean to everyone, she still didn't deserve to get raped. There's this idea of the perfect victim, not just in cases of rape, but also in cases of abuse or police violence. Basically, unless the victim was a pure, innocent angel who did nothing wrong their entire life, people will either think that they're lying or they see the awful thing that happened to them as justified. You see this explored a lot in the 70s rape movies, particularly the ones that take place in the courtroom, but rape revenge movies themselves are often guilty of perpetuating the idea of the perfect victim. The victims in these movies are young, conventionally attractive, white, not always white, but usually, and they're almost always portrayed as sweet, innocent, naive. They're just, minding their own business when they're attacked by strangers through no fault of their own. The first rape revenge movie is literally called The Virgin Spring. That's the epitome of innocence right there. This was subverted in Coralie Farjaw's Revenge, which came out in 2017. The girl in Revenge, appropriately named Jennifer, is purposely designed to be the most unlikable character imaginable. She's a homewrecker. She's knowingly sleeping with a married man with young children.
Everything would be so simple if the kids weren't there.
And she doesn't feel guilty whatsoever. She is, by most people's standards, a bad person. But she still doesn't deserve to be raped. No one deserves to be raped. And giving Loralee an actual human face outside the crude costume Marlston wears to kill people is a reminder of her humanity. That she was just a kid who got really unlucky and ended up in a horrible situation she could not get away from, and then everyone blamed her for it. I would argue that the same effect might have been achieved from a yearbook photo or a home video, but still, it adds a little bit of needed pathos to the victim, and that's never a bad thing. And finally, probably one of the most important reasons for including this scene is so that we can see with our own eyes how guilty Brent is. When we first hear about the assault, it's from Jody's mother, Marge, who, again, is not super reliable. Rape revenge movies have been showing women as being complicit within rape culture since at least Das Phantom von Soho.
Die Filiati hatte den Vertrag vermittelt. Sobald das Schiff auf offener See war, wurde ich in die Kabine von Lord Morehouse bestellt. Als ich mich wehrte, kam die Filiati. Sie wollte mich überreden, vernünftig zu sein.
They're never the main perpetrators in the assault, except for maybe in the god-awful I Spit on Your Grave sequel that came out in 2019. But even then, Becky gets interrupted before she can do anything, and the main assault is carried out by a man. Otherwise, unless you want to count Deliverance as a rape revenge movie, which, yeah, you definitely can, the rapists in these stories are always men and the victims are always women. However, there are women who are friends or are in a relationship with the rapists and enable their crimes. Sometimes they help the rapists lure in victims.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, don't leave them just standing out there, you idiots. Bring them on in. You're freaking these poor girls out.
In some cases, they're a part of the system itself, being a person in power who helps the rapist get away with it.
Yes, I mean, because what would you have me do? Ruin a young man's life every time we get an accusation like this?
But also, sometimes they're just an ordinary person who just refuses to help or believe the victim.
Don't get blackout drunk all the time and then expect people to be on your side when you have sex with someone you don't want to.
Bad Reputation is super interesting in this regard because while it is just an extremely standard rape revenge movie, it does put a lot more focus on the woman's role in upholding rape culture. Michelle's mother blames her for getting raped.
Oh, I have warned you your entire life to beware of men. And the first chance you get, one invites you out and you go panning after him like some bitch in me. If you want to be a whore, Michelle, be a whore. But don't expect me to act like it's okay.
And then when Michelle finally snaps and decides to go on a killing spree, she not only targets the rapists, but their girlfriends. Despite knowing what their boyfriends did, the girlfriends chose to believe their story and went out of their way to bully and shame Michelle. One of the girlfriends is even sympathetic towards Michelle, but chooses to do nothing. And Michelle hates her more than anyone.
Yeah, you tried to stop them until you thought it might threaten your spot on the pep squad. God, you're the worst of all of them. You knew it was wrong and you didn't do a goddamn thing to stop it.
Marge married a rapist. She seems in heavy denial about it, but regardless, she knew what Loralee said, and she chose to believe Brent over her. We don't know what kind of relationship the two have. They never actually appear on screen at the same time, which is weird. And the only thing we ever learn about them is that Brent doesn't let her smoke in the house. But regardless, she's still defending him even 27 years later. She changes the story to make it sound as if it wasn't a rape.
That a drunken girl had sex with 3 drunken boys.
And she is extremely insistent that Brent wasn't involved because he was too drunk.
Yes, honey, he didn't participate. He was sick. He was falling down drunk.
Marlston forces Brent to tell the story later, and despite Brent being wasted that night, he does remember a lot of what happened, and even fesses up to the fact that he was involved.
But I knew what I was doing. God help me, I knew what I was doing.
And seeing it for ourselves does allow us to really understand how much Marge was downplaying the whole event. Like, she shrugs the whole thing off as, oh, they were drunk. Loralee was drunk.
What are you gonna tell the police, that a drunken girl had sex with 3 drunken boys?
But as Brent shows us, they literally poured alcohol down her throat during the assault.
They poured booze down her throat.
There was even a line in the script that revealed that they did that to cover up what they did, meaning that, drunk or not, they knew exactly what they were doing and that they could get in trouble for it. However, the way it's shown in the movie almost kind of goes against Brent being guilty. Like, younger Brent is flopping around like a ragdoll and barely seems aware of what year it is, and the other guys are literally holding him up and pushing him into Loralee. Why wouldn't you have younger Brent be more aware and in control of his movements? This flashback just gives him a lot of plausible deniability that he is definitely not supposed to have. There's this common trope in rape revenge stories that I usually refer to as the nice rapist. Basically, whenever the assault is committed by a group, which is the case in a lot of these movies, there is almost always one guy in the group who is a little bit nicer, feels a little guilty, maybe doesn't even assault the victim but just watches.
Hey, we should cool it, man. Come on, it looks like you're hurting.
This has been present since the Virgin Spring, with the little boy who was in the group of bandits. When the story was adapted into The Last House on the Left, the boy was aged up into a teenager. He was the one who lured the girls into the hotel room and then felt really fucking bad about it after.
Stop it! Stop it! You're gonna kill someone if you're not careful.
What the hell are you doing?
Oh, shit. You guys gotta be crazy, man.
So much so that his own father manages to talk him into taking his own life.
Blow your brains out! Blow your...
The quintessential nice rapist is Matthew from the original I Spit on Your Grave. He is friendly with Jennifer before the assault.
Could I be your friend?
And the movie spends a long time focusing on the pure betrayal on her face when he comes out of the bushes. Matthew is obviously feeling guilty about what he's doing. He doesn't want to be part of it at all.
Not now. Not now. Fucking asshole, we got it for you. Come on. I can't do it now.
And he actually ends up saving Jennifer's life at the end of the attack. But she kills him anyways. He still raped her. A nice rapist is still a rapist, and someone who helps a rapist is still culpable. They are never, ever given any kind of lenience during the revenge.
Well, as far as angry redneck sex traffickers go, he was the nice one.
12 seconds later.
With the only exception being The Last House on the Left remake, but they had to do a lot of legwork to make sure that this kid stayed sympathetic through the whole movie. But otherwise, no, the nice rapist is killed just like all the cruel rapists. A rapist is a rapist. Even if they weren't as bad, they still did something that they knew was wrong, and they deserve to be punished for it. Out of the 2 rapists we see in Cherry Falls as adults, Brent is a lot more sympathetic than Mr. Sizzler. Most of the violence during the assault wasn't committed by him, and he seems to actually care that Loralee had such a rough time after, and shows genuine remorse at some points.
Don't talk to me about responsibilities. You and I both know what it means to walk away from those.
But he still did it, and he still got away with it. It specifically mentioned he never turned his friends into the police.
But he went to the police then, and then he told them what happened. Those were his good friends. He couldn't do that.
If he was really sorry, he would have backed up Loralee's story and let he and his buddies get punished. But nope, he never did that. He seemingly lied just like everyone else. And worse still, he let that lie carry him into a job in law enforcement. As discussed before, rape revenge stories have their origins in the failure of law enforcement and the justice system in general. This has more or less remained a consistent part of the rape revenge genre even into the new millennium. 2015's Even Lambs Have Teeth has 2 teenage girls getting abducted by a trafficking ring, and then when the sheriff shows up, they initially think that they've been saved, until it's revealed that the sheriff is in on it. And then he rapes one of them. This is similar to a twist in the 2010 remake of I Spit on Your Grave. The original was inspired by the horrible ways the cops treated a real-life victim, but there's no actual cops in the movie at all. Jennifer never tries going to the cops. She just decides to take care of it herself from the get-go. However, in the remake, Jennifer briefly manages to escape from her rapists and runs into the sheriff, who initially accuses her of lying before joining in on the assault himself. The sequels to this film continue to hammer in how the police don't help victims, but it takes more the approach of them being more incompetent than evil. The cop we see in the second movie is pretty nice and sympathetic towards the survivor, although he does ask a lot of the same questions over and over again and doesn't seem to believe parts of her story.
So, 3 men broke into your apartment in New York.
I've told you already.
Forgive me, this is a strange story.
But worse than that is that he just kind of hands her over to this woman who shows up claiming to be from a woman's crisis center. Spoiler alert, she's not. I don't know how this could even happen. Did you not ask for ID? Likewise, the third movie portrays the main detective as sympathetic and understanding, but he's not good at getting convictions.
He rapes and murders my friend, and you just let him walk away.
Not wearing a cape and a utility belt. I'm a cop. I did my job. It's not all up to me.
Multiple rapists are let go to wander the streets in I Spit on Your Grave 3.
They lost his DNA, so he didn't rape my daughter.
And this is what ends up fueling Jennifer's newest killing spree.
But you're not talking about punishment. You're talking about vengeance. Taking the law into your own hands.
I'd rather that than leave it in nobody's, which is where it is now.
Brent seems like a good cop for most of the movie. He's saddened by the victims' deaths. He recognizes that not sharing important information on the case might have gotten a girl killed.
Maybe Annette DeWolf would be alive today if I'd revealed details about the first 2 killings.
So chooses to tell the public about the virgin thing, even though he knows it'll cause a panic.
We're gonna have a goddamn fuckfest on our hands.
It's better than a pile of dead teenagers.
But it really seems that Brent's main concern is of his daughter. He's introduced as being extremely overprotective and strict with her staying out too late.
You know what time it is?
Daddy, don't scare me like
You're
that.
grounded the next 2 Friday nights.
And once the murders start happening, his main thought is if the killer will be targeting her next. During the scene of the coroner confirming that all the victims were virgins, we see a flash of Stacy's torture, Annette's corpse, and then Jody lying in bed. What this means seems pretty clear. Brent is looking at the torture of these girls and is terrified that the same will happen to his daughter. This would actually be another reason the girls get it worse than the guys in this movie, because it causes Brent to become panicked about his own little girl. This informs his actions for the rest of the movie, how far out of his way he goes to try and find the killer, and the lengths he goes to protect his child, even at the cost of his own life. But the reveal that he's a rapist recontextualizes everything we know about Brent, about what kind of a cop he is, what kind of a father he is. Brent being overprotective and giving Jody an extremely early curfew seems a lot darker now. Brent knows from first-hand experience exactly what could happen to a young girl out late alone at night, particularly since Jody kind of looks like Loralee. Mostly the version we see Marilyn dressed up as. Dark hair, black clothing with splashes of red. In the script, there's a moment where Marge runs her fingers through Jody's hair while cooking and it leaves a streak of flour. This didn't make it into the film, but it at least shows that Jody somewhat resembling Loralee was intentional. And you know that one weird moment when Brent is teaching Jody self-defense and there's like weird sexual chemistry between them? I've seen people online say that this moment is so awkward it's funny, but director Jeffrey Wright says in the commentary track that moments like these point to a much darker story.
Now, this scene hinted at a strange sexual tension between these 2 characters. This kind of thing really kind of belongs in a serious, dark, kind of a much heavier movie. But here we were doing a kind of a farce in a way, but the key thing to remember is that it is a black farce. This is the nature of Cherry Falls. That's what sets it apart from a lot of other films like this. It's not a light film. It looks like a light film, but it kind of isn't.
So I almost kind of wonder if maybe, with Jody looking a little bit like Loralee, and her being around the same age Loralee was when Brent raped her, yeah. Especially since in the flashback we see that Brent was basically thrown on top of Loralee during the assault. Maybe him falling on top of Jody in a similar way is straight up triggering something in him. That's obviously a very dark interpretation I don't have a lot of evidence for, but what is undeniable is that Brent completely hinders the investigation into finding the virgin killer and puts Jody in even more danger. You can see the exact moment when Brent realizes that the town's children being murdered is directly connected to the rape he committed when he was young, but he doesn't say anything. He doesn't say anything to the FBI. He doesn't say anything to his deputy. He straight up lies and says he doesn't recognize the person in the sketch.
Can you make a sheriff?
No.
He has a crucial piece of information that could potentially stop the killer right then and there, and he keeps it to himself. He chose to tell the parents about the killer targeting virgins because to him, it was the right thing to do. He says it himself. Annette might still be alive if he told people about it earlier. And yet, he doesn't tell any of the authorities that he knows the person in the police sketch. I guess the information that could make him look bad is too sensitive to make public. The only person he ends up telling is Mr. Sizzler, who's the only other person in town he knows is in the same boat, and who would also probably help him cover this all up.
Are you looking at it? Tell me that's not her.
Who?
Loralee Sherman.
The part of the movie then where Brent is driving around looking for Loralee and trying to figure out what happened to her, this isn't him going the extra mile to stop a killer and protect his child. It's him sneaking around everyone's backs, trying to get this taken care of quietly so no one has to find out his big secret.
I'm going to West Virginia.
West Virginia? We need you here.
Well, there's something I gotta do there.
If Jody really was his main concern, he would have told the FBI immediately who the sketch looked like. He would have given up his reputation, his career, any goodwill he had at all to ensure that the person who almost killed his daughter is caught as soon as possible. But he didn't. Even when his past has returned and is hurting the next generation, he stays quiet. His reputation is ultimately more important than the lives of the town's children, than the life of his daughter. And it isn't just Brent who is culpable here. The situation with Loralee wasn't exactly a secret. Marge knew about it when it was going on, and she talks about it like the whole town was involved.
So you all just let it go?
Yeah. People seemingly knew about the accusations, and yet Brent was elected sheriff, and Mr. Sizzler was allowed to be the principal. And that's a little problematic, right? Like, the people in charge of the town's children and the town's safety are rapists. Can they really be trusted to act fairly if someone goes to them claiming they were assaulted? For that matter, can they be trusted not to abuse their positions and hurt the people they're meant to protect? But even if we assume that they're both changed and are good people now, I mean, Loralee was run out of town. A young girl came forward claiming 4 boys raped her, and she was humiliated and shunned, while those boys were awarded with positions of power in the community. A lot of rape revenge movies typically portray the rapists as deviants. They're criminals who hide in bad neighborhoods or in the woods and attack any pretty girl who crosses their path. Or gangs who roam the street all day looking for people to kill or assault. Or strangers with thick accents who lure in naive young women before drugging and trafficking them. There's an element of class at play here. Usually the assailants are lower class thugs or hillbillies targeting people who are more well off.
Oh, no. We actually live in the city.
How many houses do you have? Well, as far as angry redneck sex traffickers go.
Where's that? New York City?
Mm-hmm.
You come from an evil place.
You know, it's the Tucker and Dale trope, which ironically enough got popularized by Deliverance, which is kind of sort of a rape revenge movie in itself. I said earlier that rape is something that people are intrinsically disgusted by, and that the vast majority of people hate rapists. And this is true when the rapists look like this. But when the rapist is your friend, your neighbor, your son, there's a huge percentage of Americans who are so terrified of Mexicans crossing the border and raping our women.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
But voted a man with extremely credible rape accusations against him into office. Twice. Granted, as of the time of me recording this, it seems like his supporters are finally starting to turn on him. But honestly, this isn't just about Donald Trump. I am still extremely resentful of the fact that the 2020 US presidential election came down to two old men with allegations of sexual assault against them. People like to use rape to frame one side as worse than another, or to get cheap political points. Like I've seen it 100 times, people will post pictures of Trump or Musk with Ghislaine Maxwell and respond with pics of her at Chelsea Clinton's wedding as some kind of gotcha. You know, as if to say, oh, you think my guy is bad, but what about your guy? And it's like, no, lock him up too. I don't care what someone's politics are. A rapist is a rapist. But people make excuses when it's someone they like. Even if they're a rapist, or a Nazi, or a puppy killer.
But Noem, responding yesterday saying, I followed the law and was being a responsible parent, dog owner, and neighbor, adding that shooting her dog wasn't easy, but often the easy way isn't the right way.
If it's someone they think is cool, or they agree with politically, then they just say, oh, they didn't mean it, or it was a misunderstanding, or it wasn't really that big of a deal, don't blow things out of proportion. But they have absolutely no problem accusing people they don't like of heinous crimes. Hell, they'll accuse entire groups of people. Black people, immigrants. Right now there's a huge movement going on saying LGBT plus people shouldn't be around children because we're all perverts and pedophiles, with trans women in particular getting singled out for being particularly dangerous. J.K. Rowling has literally been freaking the fuck out about how she thinks trans women are dangerous perverts for like half a decade now, but is sending flowers to accused rapist Marilyn Manson. The Duggar family were trying to get anti-trans legislation passed on the basis that trans people are dangerous perverts.
I don't believe the citizens of Saville would want males with past child predator convictions that claim they are female to have a legal right to enter private areas reserved for women and girls,
while literally covering up that their son is a child molester.
He said he was just curious about girls, and he had gone in and just basically touched them over their clothes while they were asleep, and they didn't even know he had done it.
Beloved family-friendly TV personalities, movie executives, billionaires and politicians, priests and other religious figures, members of the British royal family.
But you were staying at the house of
Yes.
a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay.
Most of these people were known to be sex pests for years, decades, and most of the time they didn't even try to hide it. British YouTuber Rachel Oates has an excellent video where she goes through Jimmy Saville's autobiography and points out all the times he brags about having sex with underage girls.
At 11:30 the next morning, she was willingly presented to an astounded lady of the law. The officeress, was dissuaded from bringing charges against me by her colleagues, for it was well known that were I to go, I would probably take half the station with me.
and no one did anything until after he was dead. He was even protected, with people calling him out directly, being censored by the BBC.
I know some rumours. I bet none of this will be allowed out.
I shouldn't imagine libelous stuff will be allowed out.
Nothing I said is liable.
Did they air that? No. It just got suppressed.
Yeah.
For legal reasons.
Yeah.
This is something sometimes explored within the rape revenge genre, even towards the very beginning. 1964's Das Phantom von Soho has the killer turn out to be a woman who was hired onto a boat, realizing too late that it was a cruise where rich men would rape all the women on board. The rich men initially tried to pay her off, before deciding to just kill her, and then after she escapes, she murders all the rich men one by one and gives them their money back. Blink Twice, from 2024, takes the same basic concept, but cranks it up to 100. A bunch of women are invited onto a billionaire's island and are unknowingly assaulted every night by him and his buddies before having their memory wiped. The movie has a lot of similarities to Epstein's Island and also Diddy parties, which were exposed after this movie was filmed. And as of me recording this bit, Diddy has officially not been punished for. But writer-director Zoe Kravitz grew up in Hollywood, and Diddy parties existed for decades. It might not be a coincidence, is all I'm saying. Probably the most extreme version of this happens in the 2018 movie The Nightingale, which is about colonialism. British officer is in control of an Irish prisoner, and he does the most heinous shit to her and her family, and literally no one believes her.
My husband is lying dead in a shack, murdered by your officers.
You want me to take the word of a woman convict over that of an officer?
There's also a scene where the British come across an Aboriginal woman, and they just kind of, casually take her along as a sex slave, just abduct her like it's no big deal.
I just want to try one, sir. Just once.
No.
You've swiped them before, why can't I?
Don't be disgusting.
You can swipe her first, sir. I don't mind.
Tie her up to the car. Any problems? That's the end of it.
It's foul. It's hard to watch. And there's no happy ending here. Not really. The British successfully colonized Australia. There were probably thousands and thousands of tragedies just like these that will never see justice. But even focusing on the power dynamic on a smaller scale, American Mary has a young medical student being raped by her professor at a party after he mistakenly thinks that she's working as a prostitute.
I'm guessing you thought I went into prostitution. And that's why you invited me to the party last night.
With the implication being that the doctors at Mary's hospital have been raping sex workers because they know that they won't come forward and report them. Promising young woman shows a guy who raped a girl at a college party being let off the hook and growing up to become a successful doctor that everyone loves and admires.
Oh, yes, Alexander Monroe. He actually just came back and gave a talk here. Oh, he's a really nice guy.
And he is just straight up not allowed to take any kind of responsibility for the awful shit he does.
It was an accident, right? It was an accident.
I mean, of course it was a fucking accident.
Yeah, of course it was a fucking accident.
This particular movie struck a chord with audiences when it came out. I know several people who were extremely affected by it, probably because it was coming off the heels of the Brock Turner case, in which a college student raped a girl at a party, and despite being found guilty, he was given the lightest sentence possible because the judge didn't want to ruin his life. There was this awful fucking quote from his father that was going around, that jail time would be a steep price to pay for 20 minutes of action, which is insane. No thought at all to the survivor's life being ruined. No, we have to protect the perpetrator and not the victim. When Marge speaks of Loralee's assault, she talks about how the boys who raped her were from good families, that they were beloved members of the community, that they were on the football team. It's revealed that Brent himself was the star quarterback.
She never had the nerve to approach the big star quarterback, Brent Monken.
And so when Loralee came forward with accusations against all of them, no one believed her. The community shunned Loralee and chose to believe her rapist's word over hers.
And why weren't they charged?
Because they were from good families, stars of the football team, that kind of thing, and she was just this loner that nobody cared for.
The community supported the rapist so much, in fact, that 2 of them would go on to be in charge of that community. This is ultimately what Marlston's motivation is. The way he sees it, his mother wasn't just victimized by her rapists. She was victimized by the entire town.
It's a stinking hypocritical world, isn't it, Brent? Where rapists become the pillars of the community.
In the 1998 script, Marlston refers to the way the town treated his mother as rape. This is what I was put on this earth to do. Rape the town that raped my mother. Steal its pristine innocence like it stole hers. Now, this lie didn't make it into the film, but the essence of it is still present. After Jody finds out that her father is a rapist, she goes over to Kenny's house, and Kenny brings up the idea of a spiritual virginity.
You lose your spiritual virginity when you realize that your parents are even bigger hypocrites than your friends are.
This introduces the idea that virginity isn't something that is purely physical. It's also emotional. It's the act of losing something, not just your innocence, but also a sense of security, a sense of the way things are. Jody grew up thinking that her father was a good guy, and is shattered by the realization that he's actually a rapist, and that everyone in the town she grew up in has covered for him.
I'm not gonna hurt her. You are, with the truth.
So, obviously the name of the town is a virginity joke, right? It's based on the expression popping your cherry, which refers to the fact that some people bleed when they have sex for the first time. But Cherry Falls is also seemingly the name of the waterfalls just outside the town, where the first 2 murders take place. The movie opens with idyllic shots of the town of Cherry Falls, and then the falls themselves, crystal clear and serene. And then the very last shot of the movie is of the falls turning red. Now, considering the very name of these falls is referring to the blood that can result in sex, it's not hard to associate them turning red with blood. And the murders Marlston commits are very, very bloody, or at least they would be if the MPAA wasn't fucking awful. And we also have the imagery of Annette's parents spilling red wine onto a white tablecloth while their daughter is getting murdered, which, much like the white sheets were supposed to be splashed with blood during the orgy, is extremely on-the-nose imagery. And aside from Brent and the principal, Marlston was purposely targeting the most innocent members of the town. He says so himself when he's monologuing about his motive.
So what better to deprive them of the only innocence they have left? Their precious, virginal children.
He wants to take the town's innocence, ergo, he wants to take the town's virginity. And the way he's doing that is to make sure that there's no more virgins left in Cherry Falls. He kills off the few kids he knows for sure are virgins, and then leaves the word virgin at every crime scene. When Brent comes to talk to the students, he tries to get him to share more information, hoping that finding out that virgins are being killed will make all the kids go crazy and lose their virginities as soon as humanly possible. Which is exactly what ends up happening. By the end of the movie, there still are some people who are physically virgins, sure. Jody is still a virgin. Kenny is probably still a virgin. Sandy and Mark never went up to have sex. But everyone in Cherry Falls has lost their spiritual virginity. They're all traumatized, half naked, covered in blood. Marlston even rubbed blood directly onto Stacy before killing her, as if marking that she's lost her innocence after being forced to watch her boyfriend die. He's not physically assaulting his victims, aside from some forcible kissing, but he is doing to them what he feels was done to his mother. Loralee's rape didn't stop in the woods. It continued on when she tried to get the town to help her, and they refused to believe her story. If the town of Cherry Falls stood behind Loralee, she might have been able to recover from the trauma. She might have had support when she had her child. Marlston's life very well could have been a lot better if Cherry Falls hadn't run his mother out and protected her rapists. So in Marlston's mind, this is fair punishment. Rod, Stacy, Annette, Timmy, they individually did nothing to Loralee or Marlston, but they are part of the community that victimized them. So in Marlston's mind, they're just as guilty as the actual rapists, and he's doing exactly to them what they did to his mother, and as such, did to him. But there is some irony in what Marlston is doing to his victims. You know, he's saying that rapists become pillars of the community. Well, Marlston became a teacher, an extremely beloved teacher that his students seem to really love and respect. Is that not being a pillar of the community in some sense? The kids should have been able to trust their teacher to put their interests and well-being first, but he not only betrayed that trust, but exploited it, using his position over the students to learn their secrets and use them to hurt them. Jody even says when she shows up at Marlston's door,
You're just about the only person that I trust these days.
Only for him to lock her in his basement and torture her.
That hurt.
We see this portrayal when Jody confronts him for the last time, with her flashing back to the man she thought she knew, and then all the ways he went on to hurt her. Marlston became a rapist himself. Perhaps not physically, but spiritually. The security the town thought it had, the trust it had in the people who took care of their children, gone. The town's innocence has been taken away, and the waterfalls, the ones the town is named after, turned blood red. Now, one interesting thing I noticed while I was working on this video is that Cherry Falls kind of has a weird amount in common with Promising Young Woman. Both feature a rape survivor's loved one seeking revenge years after the assault, going after not only the rapists, but the system that allowed the rapists to get away with their crimes. The rapists in both movies are portrayed as upstanding citizens who have gone on to help their communities immensely and seem to hold at least a little remorse for what they did, but absolutely refuse to take any accountability for it. And both have the person seeking revenge dressing up in a wig, tying up and torturing the rapist to try to get them to confess to their crime, and then attempting to carve a word into someone's flesh, before ultimately being killed before their quest for justice can be complete. However, Promising Young Woman ends weirdly optimistically. This movie spent the entire runtime hammering into our heads that the system fails victims, that the word of smart and seemingly well-meaning men is held to a higher standard than the word of the women they victimize.
Because what would you have me do? Ruin a young man's life every time we get an accusation like this?
That lawyers go to absolutely insane lengths to demonize the victims and make them look crazy and vindictive.
I got a bonus for every settlement out of court. I got another bonus for every charge dropped. We all did. His only job was to comb through all their social media accounts for any compromising information. He contacted old friends, past sexual partners, one drunk photo at a party. Oh, you wouldn't believe how hostile that makes a jury.
And then it ends on the note of, yay, the police are here. It's all okay now. As if there aren't literally dozens of witnesses that can personally attest to how mentally unstable and borderline dangerous Cassie was before her death. There's no way Al isn't getting off on self-defense. Cherry Falls, in contrast, ends on a much more somber note. Halfway through the movie, when Marge is explaining Loralee's assault to Jody, Jody asks her why, if Loralee could identify her attackers, did none of them ever get charged. Marge tells her that it's because they were all from good families, and then goes on to say,
I don't know, it wouldn't have held up in court. Not then. I don't think it would have held up now.
And when the time comes for Loralee's case to be brought up and re-examined, it isn't. First, because of Brent refusing to tell the FBI agents what he'd done, And then because of Jody. Jody at one point looked like she was going to break the cycle. She was outraged that her parents lied and that her mother was trying to minimize the rape.
Who? You said it was rape.
But by the end of the movie, she's perpetuating it, doing the exact same thing her parents did for decades.
And you can think of no reason why Leonard Marlston committed these murders?
No.
She probably feels loyalty to her father now that he saved her life, and her only other male role model betrayed her. She even uses the self-defense move Brent taught her in the beginning of the movie to throw Marlston off the balcony, showing her connection to him and everything he did to seemingly protect her. And it's completely understandable that she would feel this way, but nonetheless, she is doing exactly what the town did 27 years before, deciding that she likes Brent more than the person making the accusations against him and choosing to protect him over the victims. And by doing this, Jody is ensuring that Brent will remain a pillar of the community and Loralee and Marlston just loners that nobody cared for. Then she walks outside and sees Loralee Sherman standing across the street. Now, what exactly is happening here? I don't know. You know, maybe this is Loralee, maybe this is Marlston's ghost, but either way, Marlston is dead. That is completely undeniable. Not only is he the rare character who actually dies on screen, but the imagery is also very clear that he's done. The moon comes out when the first murders happen, and it gets covered up when Marlston gets skewered. He's gone. His rampage is over. But Marlston wasn't an anomaly who showed up into a perfect, peaceful little community and just started killing for no reason. He was created by the town, and he got his revenge. He saw the town punished. Marlston successfully shoved the pipe up its ass like in every other rape revenge movie. But because of Jody covering up for her father, the town will never know why it got punished, and there will never be any form of justice. Two of Loralee's rapists might be dead, but they're now seen as innocent random murder victims. There are parents who are never going to know why their child was murdered. There are students who are never going to know why their teacher suddenly snapped one day and started attacking them. And that is the note this movie ends on. No one got justice. This is a regular occurrence, and it's going to keep happening because Jody refused to do something about it. She had a chance to finally bring some closure to this town, to allow the people in it to reflect on their mistakes and heal. But instead, she chose to maintain the status quo, and as a result, the problem is still there. Rape culture isn't upheld by the rapists, but by the people who protect them. And Jody, the younger generation, is doing that now. And because she's chosen to continue the cycle, to maintain the toxic environment that created Marlston in the first place, it's only a matter of time before something like this happens again. Or it's just a sequel tease that didn't work out because I'm the only one that remembers this movie. The first time I made this video, I ended on the note that if any slasher movie had to give me a ridiculous amount of trauma, I'm glad it was this one. Even with all the horror movies I have watched since I made my original video, this remains genuinely one of the most interesting ones. I know I probably overanalyzed it more than it deserves, but I do think it's warranted. There's just so many logs to roll over and find all the weird little bugs hiding underneath. And it's so weirdly tragic that this movie in particular got the shit end of the stick. In the Blu-ray interviews, one of the producers pointed out that Blumhouse could probably make Cherry Falls today for $5 million.
I can't help but think that if it were a script today that Blumhouse would say, of course we'll make this for $5 million.
And yeah, she's absolutely right about that. In the last video, I did say that a remake might be a good idea, and to follow that up, if that was ever going to happen, it is a good time for it. Most horror movies have some kind of deeper meaning nowadays, especially about trauma. Horror movies about feminism and gender are becoming more popular. One was even nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. And due to the success of Terrifiers 2 and 3, movies have been getting gorier and gorier, so a lot of the kill scenes could finally be shown like they were written in the script. However, now being 5 years older and having spent more time in the movie theater consuming horror, I am no longer of the opinion that a remake would be a good idea. And not even just because I'm reading The Room and seeing that making the villain a dude who dresses like a woman to rape a town is extremely not cool right now, although that is part of it for sure. But honestly, I just don't trust Blumhouse to remake this movie. I am in the very small minority of people who absolutely loathed the Blumhouse version of Speak No Evil. It was genuinely one of my least favorite movies of last year. Way to take a genuinely gripping and devastating piece of art about the attitudes of a particular culture and just strip everything interesting away to make it as marketable as possible. And looking at the rape revenge movies that have been remade, well, I already talked about the substance that got taken out of I Spit on Your Grave, but they did lighten up Last House on the Left quite a bit in 2009. And I do kind of like the Last House remake a little bit, mostly because I think the tone in the original is way too inconsistent and they did fix that. But I also acknowledge that the whole point of Last House on the Left was that revenge doesn't fix anything. The ending is left unsatisfying because no matter how gory and painful the revenge was, their daughter is dead. There's nothing they could do to bring her back. And making it so that Mary lives and giving the dad one less gruesome, satisfying kill does completely ruin that. Back when I made the original video, I said some stupid shit. Not in the video per se, but just around about how I don't like it when stuff gets remade and has politics added to it. Like, I think the new Black Christmas had just come out and I said some rude shit about it. Pretty much just because everyone else was saying rude shit about it. I didn't actually watch it. Like I said before, I was the absolute worst. But now that I've actually seen it for myself, the problem with the new Black Christmas is not that it's political. I mean, there were plenty of explicitly political movies that came out in the late 2010s that I really enjoyed, even back then. And there were some movies that came out a few years after that pretty much did the exact same thing as the 2019 Black Christmas and didn't get the same amount of hate.
You are a traitor! Bitches like you are the fucking problem!
Especially Promising Young Woman. Like, 2019 Black Christmas and Promising Young Woman have a lot in common. 2019 Black Christmas handles the police better, though.
They didn't believe me when I told them what Brian had done to me. So what makes you think that they're gonna believe us now?
So, that's a point in its favor, I guess. But also, and I feel like people forget this, the original Black Christmas was political too. That movie is extremely pro-choice. Like, if it came out today exactly as it is, people would be calling it woke garbage, which is exactly what people called the remake. So, really, the 2019 Black Christmas is kind of a fitting remake in that it tries to expand on what was already there. I wouldn't say it's a good movie. At best, it's a very mid-slasher, and it's not scary at all. Which is too bad, because the original is absolutely terrifying. It's genuinely one of the scariest slashers out there. But I honestly think that I like the Black Christmas remake better than the Speak No Evil remake. At least the 2019 Black Christmas has some balls. And Cherry Falls does too. It swings for the fences, and I genuinely appreciate that. The writer and director, in separate interviews years apart, both said that they wanted to take a left-wing approach to the sexuality in horror movies.
In this one, I think we've created the first kind of liberal psychopath, if you will. They're usually very conservative.
And I always thought that having the promiscuous girls killed off first was a kind of very right-wing thing, and I thought it'd be funny to turn that on its head.
So the politics are completely baked in there, and I appreciate how completely unapologetic it is about it. Even if it's not perfect, and it definitely is not perfect, it is a piece of art that has something to say, and I love it for that. I think maybe the best ending we can hope for this movie is that someday the lost footage will be found, so we can finally see it the way it was intended. And hell, with the previously unreleasable Toxic Avenger remake finally getting a theatrical run, now that theaters are cool with showing gross unrated movies, maybe Cherry Falls could finally get a theatrical run too. I'd love it if they found the lost footage like this year or next year, so the movie could have a second wind 27 years after its initial release. Like, how fitting would that be? I just hope I finally did this movie justice. Granted, I'm sure I'll probably start hating this video in a few months, like literally every other video I make. But God, have I put a lot of thought into this movie, and having gone through it as thoroughly as I have such a new appreciation for it. Maybe it's taken 20 years, but it's 20 years well spent. Now, hopefully, I can move on with my life and do something else. There's a certain black and white clown who's been needing my attention. Again. So, see you in however long for the Terrifier 3 video. Assuming I don't have god-awful fucking copyright problems again. But yeah, anyways, like and subscribe. Goodbye. Alright. Thank you so much for watching. Special thanks to my patrons. Special thanks to my top patron, Steven Hutchinson. If you want to join my Patreon, it's in the description. You know, if you really liked whatever the fuck this turned out to be. And I think about giving me some money, I guess. I don't know. There's a fair chance this is not going to get monetized because I said rape like 50. No, it wasn't 50. I checked. It was about 120 times in this video. That's crazy. I'm gonna get age restricted into the sun. I watched so many fucking disgusting movies for this video. It's awful. I have been traumatized. I do feel very bad for, like, my friends, because, like, especially my friend Emily, I swear to God, I'd, like, text her every day, and I'd be like, oh my God, I just watched, like, this, like, really disgusting movie, and it would be like, I Spit on Your Grave 2 or something like that. I'm genuinely considering making a I Spit on Your Grave video. Not so much about the original movie, because I feel like I basically said everything about that movie that I have to say, but, the third one I could honestly probably talk about for a while. Like, the third one is very interesting. I think probably my favorite movie that I watched out of all of these, out of ones that I've never seen before. Because some of these I have. Like, I saw Revenge, I saw Blink twice. Probably the one that's my favorite that I've never seen before is Teeth. I really liked Teeth. I genuinely really did. I don't know if I really have enough to say about it in like a video, but I really liked Teeth. I also liked American Mary. I have problems with it. It is kind of a weird movie, but like something about American Mary really worked for me. And I almost kind of want to make a video on that too, but like how many fucking rape revenge movie videos can I make before it starts to look like I have a problem? And it's not like I particularly enjoy these movies, it's just that you watch like fucking like 20 movies in such a short amount of time and then try to write up like little things about them, you start to form opinions, and like now I have opinions on them. I also want to apologize for my voice in this video. I mean, my voice always sounds so fucking bad. God, I get like accused of using AI voices, and it's like, no, some people just sound stupid, and I'm one of those people, unfortunately. And it's like, I've made peace with it. I've been editing myself talking for like 6 years now. I do not cringe at the sound of my own voice. I'm kind of just like whatever about it. But I know that it's a little dumb to other people, and I know that people always like make fun of me for being nasally. The thing is like, I try not to sound nasally when I record. I take steps to avoid it. I just think this is what I sound like. Like, there are videos of me 6 years old, I sound the exact same. So there's nothing I can do about it, gang. But I will say that I did get really bad allergies about halfway through this video, and it was a problem, and I couldn't just not record for like 3 weeks. So, there definitely are parts of the video where I sound really bad. But I don't really want to go back and re-record like weeks worth of audio, because like what, I sound kind of gross? I don't think anyone's gonna watch this video anyways, so what the fuck ever. You know, this is like a me project. This is something I did for myself, which is funny because I tortured myself to do it, but like, it was for me. I did it. I think it's good. I think I did a good job, but I don't think anyone's gonna watch it, so people will probably watch the Terrifier 3 video whenever that gets done. I have a partially written script for it, and I haven't really done anything much without it. Actually, that's not true. I've done a lot of research. I've listened to a lot of interviews. I have a lot to say about it, so I think that'll be good too whenever I get around to actually getting that thing done. It would be nice if it was done before Christmas, but is it going to happen? I don't fucking think so. Anyways, so that's about it. Thank you so much for not only watching this, I appreciate it. I said I do not think anyone is going to watch this, but if you did and you made it this far into the video, you were my favorite. I love you. And yeah, I guess like and subscribe. I'll see you the next time. 6 months or whatever. I don't know how long the next video is gonna take. Alright, goodbye.